In recent days, the British royal family has been engulfed in a shockwave so severe that no advisor dares mention it. Outside the sealed-door meetings inside Buckingham Palace, Prince William has suddenly become the target of a series of mysterious, calculated, and chilling threats. An unidentified man has breached the prince's private vehicle area. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, leaving behind coercive documents, each drop more disturbing than the last, as though someone in the shadows is slowly pulling William into a dark, inescapable design. The incident has forced the royal household's internal security to call an emergency meeting, combing through every corner of the palace and quietly deploying a covert plan to track down the mastermind behind these vicious threats aimed at William. And from that very moment, the first layers of a much larger conspiracy began to peel back, signaling that what is unfolding may run far deeper than anyone first imagined. Could these threats be the work of an unseen hand, manipulating events from behind the scenes? What is the true motive? And more importantly, what exactly did the intruder place inside William's car that he was willing to risk his own life to deliver? London awoke to a morning shrouded in a heavy autumn mist. But it wasn't the early chill that weighed on the city. It was the sudden explosive news cascading across every major media outlet. From long-established British newspapers to global political commentary networks, all were broadcasting the same earth-shattering message. According to consolidated internal security reports, Prince William's private car was breached 3 times. He is now the target of a series of severe security threats. Within hours, the story had raced through the nation like lightning, sparking a wave of public anxiety unseen since the Megxit crisis years earlier. The word intruder flooded headlines across the country. But what left the public breathless was the number that accompanied it. 3 breaches. 3 incidents in a single week. Royal correspondence revealed that all 3 intrusions occurred in the exact same location, Prince William's private parking area, long described as impenetrable. Yet somehow, as if slipping through invisible cracks, this unknown man approached William's vehicle 3 separate times, quietly placing documents filled with veiled, coercive messages, then vanishing before any guard detected him. Buckingham Palace declined to comment, issuing only a vague statement about reviewing enhanced security measures. But in deeper analysis, many experts raised the same unsettling question. Was this a random sequence of rogue acts, or the deliberate execution of a coordinated operation? Sky News quoted a former royal security advisor who insisted the intruder's method does not resemble the behavior of a typical stalker, but rather that of someone who understood the palace's internal protection layout. The documents left behind, though their contents remain undisclosed, were described as containing direct threats, almost as if the mysterious figure was sending messages straight into the heart of the Prince of Wales. But what truly chilled the nation was the manner in which those documents appeared. 3 breaches, 3 perfect close-range entries, 3 escapes without a trace. As the media intensified its round-the-clock coverage, one question dominated: how could an unidentified man slip into William's private parking zone, an area more tightly guarded than many government facilities? Did he have a key? Did he have an insider? Or was someone with significant power opening every door for him? The deeper investigators dug, the stranger the mystery became. No one could believe a lone outsider would dare return 3 times without leaving even a fragment of evidence. Political commentators began to offer a chilling theory. The intruder is just a pawn. There must be a larger shadow directing everything. While the press hunted for clues, behind the ancient stone walls of Buckingham Palace, an oppressive silence lingered. Prince William proceeded with his schedule as if nothing had happened. No cancelled meetings, no avoidance of the media, no visible increase in security. His calmness only heightened Britain's curiosity and unease. It was becoming clear this was no ordinary breach. No prank. No impulsive act. It felt like a silent declaration of war, precise, deliberate, and aimed directly at the heir to the British throne. And now the nation and the world wait, uneasy and on edge, for the answers to the questions echoing through every newsroom. What does this mysterious figure want? Who is protecting him? And why has Prince William become the target of a calculated, deliberate threat campaign? Before the world learned about the chain of threats that would later shake the royal family, we must trace everything back to the very first step, the night when the earliest sign of something abnormal appeared in the silence. On the night of November 15th, London was wrapped in its familiar damp chill, the sky draped in a thick blanket of clouds, like a gray curtain suspended above the city. Inside the palace, the large clock struck 10 p.m. Its deep, dry chime echoing down long corridors where the warm yellow lights had already been dimmed in preparation for another quiet night in the British royal household. Prince William had just finished an exhausting day of work. Meetings, reports, briefings, and engagements followed one after another from morning until evening, all centered around familiar themes: security, public welfare, and the royal family's standing in the eyes of the nation. At his age, he had long grown accustomed to carrying the expectations of an entire country on his shoulders. But tonight, as he walked down the silent hallway toward his private living quarters, he felt an unusual heaviness settling across his back. A brief message arrived from one of his closest security officers. His car had been prepared in his private parking area. William's personal garage lay deep within the palace grounds, separated from the lots used for official operations. Cold white lights cast a pale glow on the concrete floor. Reflected on the polished black exterior of his vehicle, his mobile safety shell, as it was often described. Everything was so quiet that even the footsteps of a patrolling guard echoed clearly, like steady, low notes scattered across the night. As William approached his familiar vehicle, he suddenly stopped. Right on the door handle lay a white envelope placed neatly, perfectly flat, in a way that made it impossible to mistake for something that had fallen or been forgotten. It was placed deliberately, very deliberately. William stood still for a moment. Just him and that thin, unnerving object. Something so fragile and yet so out of place that it sent a chill down his spine. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, he picked it up gently, holding it the way one might hold a deadly secret. Then he stepped into the car, without telling anyone, without raising an alarm. He simply placed the envelope on the seat beside him. Like carrying an invisible piece of evidence he was not yet ready to confront. Only when he arrived home did William sit down in his study. The warm light catching the edge of the envelope, he removed his gloves and slowly broke the thin seal. Inside was a short letter, its tone sharp as a blade. "You do not deserve to be king." The following lines attacked his capability and his moral character. As if the writer knew precisely where to strike the vulnerabilities, every heir to the throne is relentlessly scrutinized for. Attached to the letter were doctored photographs, warped angles, distorted lighting, expressions cropped in ways that made William appear cold, distant, insincere, the exact opposite of the disciplined seriousness he always tried to uphold. At the bottom of the letter, a single bold sentence stood out like a command: "Abandon the throne before it's too late." William set the letter down. Not angry, not shaken, just a quiet heaviness spreading through his chest like the sudden rush of strange wind that appears before a coming storm. This threat was too direct, too intentional to be dismissed as a cruel prank. A hesitant, indecisive man, living off the fading glory of his family. A manufactured image masking inner weakness that is not the portrait of a king. There were no citations, no arguments, just verbal blades slashing exactly where he had always been judged the most, his role as the future monarch. He picked up the photographs and examined them carefully. They were familiar images. Events he had attended years ago. In the pictures, he was smiling, speaking, walking under the burst of camera flashes, like every other royal. But something was wrong. The angles had been cropped unnaturally. Backgrounds had been altered. The faces of people standing next to him were blurred or strangely brightened. Some photos were trimmed so tightly they made it appear as though he was intentionally turning his back to the crowd, as if he were cold, distant, dismissive of the public, exactly the kind of narrative tabloids often tried to construct. William realized these were not photographs from the official royal archives. They had been pulled from somewhere else and crudely manipulated to distort their original meaning. They accused him of nothing criminal, but they were dangerous enough to plant doubt about whether his public persona was authentic. He set the papers back on the desk, staring at the words as though weighing each punctuation mark. He was used to criticism, used to harsh commentary, used to waves of speculation online. But this time, something was unmistakably different. Instead of attacking him through newspapers or rumors, someone had slipped this directly into his private vehicle. Still, true to his steady, principled nature, William refused to allow a faceless envelope to unsettle him. To him, this was an act of cowardice not worth another moment of his attention. He folded the letter, placed it aside on the desk, and stood up, deciding not to waste any more energy on an anonymous figure lacking legitimacy or courage. Then he switched off the lights, left his study, and went to bed as though nothing had happened. November 17th settled over Buckingham Palace with a stillness so heavy that every footstep echoing through its long corridors sounded like a distant call from another world. William had just finished his schedule for the day and made his way down to his private garage, just as he always did. He kept the same composed demeanor he had displayed after receiving the anonymous envelope. Calm, measured, revealing neither fear nor suspicion. But tonight, as he stepped into the garage, something different caught his eye the moment he looked toward the roof of his car. A thick, dark brown folder, and on its cover, a single bold line written in heavy black ink. Pressed so firmly into the page, it looked almost carved. "You must read this time." The intruder wanted William to see it, wanted him to have no choice but to notice, wanted to push him further into a game that had already begun without his consent. William lifted the folder. He opened the car door, placed it on the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel, closing the door quietly behind him. Back in his study, William set the folder on the desk. He drew a long breath before opening it, as though he already sensed that what lay inside would change everything, and that nothing after this moment would ever be the same again. When he opened it, the thick paper gave off a cold, stale scent, like something prepared too carefully, held too long, waiting for the perfect moment. And on the very first page, William saw an image he never imagined a stranger could have taken, him standing at the school gates with one of his children, holding a tiny blue backpack in his hand. His expression was a little tired, yet softened by the quiet tenderness reserved only for private moments of fatherhood, moments he had always believed should remain sacred, untouched by the outside world. But the photo was taken from far too close, far too clear, far too directly into his face. The realization made his heart drop for a split second. He turned to the second photo. This one captured him stepping out of his car after an evening engagement. The scene was accurate, but the angle of the shot came from a position strictly off-limits to the press. Whoever took it had been somewhere no journalist would ever be allowed. Close enough to make William feel as though someone had been reaching into his life without him ever noticing. He flipped to the third image, and this time a chill ran up his spine. It was the private hallway behind his office, the one he walked only late at night, the one that had never been seen through any media lens. Yet here it was in the hands of a stranger, photographed from just the right height to capture his footsteps. But the final images were the ones that shook him the most. His children playing in the palace grounds, the afternoon sun catching the brightness of their hair, their innocent smiles untouched by the complexities of the world beyond. These were the moments William treasured above all else. Moments he wished he could hold on to forever. And yet someone, somewhere, had been standing close enough to capture every expression, every step, every small turn of their heads. These were not just photos. They were a message without words. A sinister whisper hidden beneath the paper. "I'm watching you. I'm close. Will you do what I want?" A weight pressed down on William's chest, not out of fear for himself, but from the crushing dread that settled like stone when he thought of his children. A deep, quiet fury rose within him, not loud, not explosive, but tightening behind his eyes with a steady, protective force. It was the anger of a father before it was the anger of a future king. In that moment, William understood that his earlier silence and composure had been misread. It had emboldened the intruder. It had allowed him to take another step, and William would not allow a third. He turned toward the palace's internal security office. He did not call an emergency meeting. He did not issue a public alert. He simply delivered a discreet, icy command: tomorrow. I want every camera in the garage reviewed. Every hour. Every blind spot. Not a single second missed. November the 18th draped Buckingham Palace in an unusual atmosphere, not the heavy silence of the previous days, but a sense that every stone wall was quietly observing, waiting for something to unfold. After 2 consecutive threats, William could no longer maintain the same calm composure. A slow, burning fury was rising inside him, the kind only understood by those who stand at the edge of danger aimed at their families. But he knew this, too. An unrestrained anger would turn him into the perfect prey, and William would never allow himself to become prey. That morning, he reviewed every camera recording from the garage. The footage was grainy, the lighting dim, but still clear enough to reveal the figure of a man wearing a dark cap, walking swiftly but without panic, stopping beside William's car, placing a letter or document on the door handle, and disappearing like a passing shadow. No face, no identity, but the man's physical frame, around 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, walking with deliberate steps, was enough for William to understand. This wasn't someone acting impulsively. This was someone sent, someone trained, someone who knew exactly where to go and how to enter. Watching it, a cold shiver ran down his spine and then immediately turned into a sharp, burning anger. This man had been watching him, watching his family, infiltrating one of the most tightly protected areas in the United Kingdom 3 times. But what enraged him most wasn't the intruder's recklessness. It was what that man had prepared for the 3rd threat, the thing that turned a sequence of intimidation into a direct declaration of war. That evening, when William walked down to the garage, his car sat in its usual place under the white fluorescent light, but on the back seat, something small and pitch black stood out. A black velvet box. Not an envelope. Not a file. A different symbol entirely, something crafted. Deliberate. Ritualistic. As though a sinister offering had been set down with intention. He opened the box. Inside was a miniature car crushed, not slightly damaged, but completely mangled. Twisted beyond recognition, a grotesque emblem of destruction. Beneath it was a photograph of the Paris tunnel where Diana died. The smeared lights on the wall looking like wounds that had never healed in the memory of Britain. And finally, a folded note, its handwriting eerily similar to that of his mother. Princess Diana. The message was as brutal as a blade. You will die like Diana if you do not leave the royal family. In that instant, William felt anger surge through him like a breaking wave. Not just a breach of security, not just a threat to his children. Now, someone had dragged the name of his late mother into this vile scheme, exploiting the memory of a tragedy he had never truly escaped. It was one of the cruelest acts a human being could conceive. But instead of throwing the box aside, instead of calling security in a burst of rage, William stood still, closed the lid, and drew a long breath. The fear of those first few seconds vanished, replaced by a sharp, icy clarity. Someone wanted him panicked. Someone wanted him spiraling out of control. But William understood perfectly. If he allowed emotion to take the lead, the enemy would win. And in that single moment, the trap began forming in his mind, calculated, precise, the work of a strategist. He decided to keep everything exactly as it was, keep the car in the same place, keep his schedule unchanged, keep the same calm expression before everyone. No additional guards, no new walking routes, no altered habits that might alert the watcher. The man had returned 3 times. He would return a 4th, convinced that William suspected nothing, and that was when the trap would spring shut. That night, November 18th, William's garage was as still as motionless water. His 3 most trusted security officers took position, each hidden at a different point, exactly as instructed. Don't stand near the car. Don't cast a visible shadow. Don't move until William signals. Moments later, from the far edge of the garage, the silhouette of the intruder appeared. He moved quickly but confidently, every motion familiar, rehearsed, routine. He approached the car, leaned slightly forward, reaching for the door handle. Precisely the behavior William had seen on the surveillance footage. And at that exact second, when his fingertips were a breath away from the cold metal, 3 security officers stepped out from 3 directions at once. No shouting, no weapons drawn, no unnecessary force, just a swift joint maneuver. A lock, a pivot, a controlled takedown, and the man was pinned face down to the floor in complete silence. He resisted for a moment, then surrendered entirely. When he was escorted into a secure room, he didn't wait for William to speak. Perhaps he knew he had been cornered, or perhaps he knew that if he didn't talk immediately, the person who hired him would deliver a far worse fate. His voice shook as he confessed, "Camilla, it was Camilla who hired me. Camilla who paid me. Camilla who dictated the threats. Camilla who forced me to imitate Diana's handwriting. Camilla who ordered me to target William's children. Camilla who wanted William off the line of succession at any cost." William stood still, listening to each word like shards of glass hitting the ground. No shock, no outburst of rage, only a cold, quiet confirmation in his eyes. After all the long nights of restraint, he finally had the truth, and that truth was darker than he had ever imagined. Immediately after that, on November 19th, a private meeting was convened inside an old stone chamber in the west wing of Buckingham Palace, where the warm glow of hanging lamps cast sharp shadows across the long table, making every expression more visible, more weighted than usual. William entered with a cold, controlled composure, carrying a box filled with every piece of evidence he had collected over the past 3 days. The anonymous letter, the folder of covert photographs, the black velvet box containing the crushed car model, the picture of the Paris tunnel, and the forged note mimicking Diana's handwriting. One by one, each item was placed on the table with a precise, unflinching motion, as though each piece was being fitted into the final structure of a verdict. Camilla sat at the head of the table opposite him, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair as if to anchor herself. Her eyes flicked across the evidence, trying to appear indifferent, but betraying a brief, tiny flicker of panic. A flicker William caught instantly. The door opened, and the stranger, the man who had been apprehended, was brought in. No chains, No restraints. But unmistakably broken. He stood behind William, unable to lift his gaze toward Camilla. William nodded, and a guard closed the door. The room sealed itself. There was no exit for anyone now. William spoke first, his voice low and drawn out, a sound that seemed to press down on the entire chamber. What has happened over the past 3 days goes far beyond any form of intimidation. And I believe you understand exactly why I asked you to come here. Because none of these items appeared on my car by accident first time, second time, or third time. They all lead back to the same source, the same hand. And I want to hear the answer from you, not anyone else. Camilla steadied her expression, inhaled softly, and responded. Her voice stretched thin in self-defense. William, I do not know what you are implying. Any one of these things could have been done by someone else. You cannot just point your finger at me like that. I have nothing to do with these threats. William didn't argue. He simply turned to the man who had been caught. Repeat what you told me. The man trembled, but eventually spoke. His voice long, shaking, yet clear. Each word distinct. I acted under the orders of Queen Camilla, because she was the one who met me directly, who paid me, who instructed me to write the threats, who told me to watch your family every day, who told me to place the forged letter in Princess Diana's handwriting in your car, and who forced me to do everything under absolute secrecy. She said that if I disobeyed, she would make me and my family disappear. Camilla shot to her feet, her voice pitched higher than usual, trying to project outrage but failing to hide her desperation. He's lying. He's a criminal. Of course, he would say anything to reduce his punishment. You cannot believe a nameless man like him. William didn't react to her shouting. He stared straight ahead, unwavering. So, you're telling me he created these letters himself, edited the photos himself, acquired the crushed car model himself, found the Paris tunnel photo himself, forged my mother's handwriting himself, and managed to get past 3 layers of palace security just to tarnish your reputation? Camilla froze for a single second. Just one, but enough. A truly innocent person never needs that 1 second to think. William continued, his voice sharpening with every word. I reviewed the camera footage. He is the man who appeared all 3 nights. He could not have entered the garage without someone guiding him, feeding him information, giving him precise details about my schedule and my family's movements. And the only person with access to that level of information is someone inside this household, someone who knows every vulnerability in the system. Camilla stepped back half a pace, her face draining of color, though she still tried to protest. William, you are accusing me unjustly. I have never— He cut her off with a single, long, decisive line, a blade that ended the confrontation. You wanted me off the throne so badly you did this. You threatened my children. You used my mother's memory to force me into submission. Camilla went rigid. She could no longer utter a single word, not with the evidence laid bare before her. And it was her silence, her trembling lips, the brief panic flickering through her eyes that became the clearest evidence of all. The morning of November 20th was one of the bleakest Buckingham Palace had witnessed in years. The footsteps of security officers echoed like the soft knocking of a verdict, slowly approaching its final chapter. And amid that heaviness, William and Charles appeared together, heir and king, now forced to confront an act that had moved far beyond private conflict. It had crossed into the territory of criminal threat, royal dishonor, and danger to innocent children. The man arrested in the garage the night before was escorted away, flanked by 2 rows of guards, taken to the government office, where his testimony would be recorded word for word. Every detail was examined with precision. Every piece of evidence sealed and archived according to the strict protocol reserved for cases involving the British royal family. William stood beside Charles, listening as the full confession was read aloud one final time. The long, trembling statements admitting he had followed orders, accepted payment, carried out specific instructions about the threats, planted documents in William's car, monitored his family for weeks, and especially forged Diana's handwriting to deliver the cruelest psychological blow. Everything was captured in the official record, like hammer strikes sealing shut a door that could no longer open toward redemption for the one who had orchestrated it all. William remained silent throughout. But Charles, who had long refused to comment publicly on turmoil surrounding the monarchy, stood beside his son with a face colder than any winter. When the final report was stamped, when the classified documents were moved into secure storage, William and Charles returned to the palace in a prolonged silence, as though even the air was waiting for the final judgment on Camilla. The internal council convened in an old stone chamber that had once housed some of the most consequential decisions of the Windsor dynasty. A room that normally echoed with discussion now held a motionless gravity, for everyone present understood that what was about to unfold was not a meeting, it was the end of a chapter in royal history. Camilla entered the room, her face stripped of the pride that had always accompanied her. What remained was the power of someone being pushed toward the edge of a cliff. She searched the room for even a single sympathetic glance, but met only blunt, expressionless silence from those who now knew the truth. On the long table, the black velvet box, the crushed car model, the Paris tunnel photo, and the forged note in Diana's handwriting sat neatly arranged. Silent witnesses that could not be refuted. Charles rose slowly, almost as if trying to stretch the final seconds before speaking words he never imagined he would have to say. Not to her, not after years of shielding her. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes heavy with disappointment, anger, and the deep ache of betrayal, the kind inflicted only by someone one has long protected. Then his voice finally emerged, low and resonant, ringing through the chamber like a funeral bell. What you have done is no longer within the bounds of jealousy or personal conflict. It has become an act that threatened the life of a royal family member, breached palace security, manipulated and abused the authority of the British Crown. As of today, you no longer have a place within the royal family. The words struck Camilla like a freezing gust, knocking away whatever remnants of resistance she had left. She opened her mouth, attempting to defend herself, but the words choked in her throat when she met Charles's eyes. Not a flare of anger, but a disappointment so deep there was nothing left to argue. William stood beside his father, saying nothing. No hatred, no triumph. He had never wished for this outcome. He had only wanted safety for his family, for his children not to grow up under threat and fear born from within the palace itself. But Camilla's actions had crossed every boundary imaginable, leaving exile as the only possible resolution. The decision was read aloud. Her privileges were stripped instantly. Her title, her access to inner palace areas, her motorcade, her staff, her role as a royal representative all revoked. Only one path remained: to leave the palace as someone with no position whatsoever in the royal structure. Camilla walked out of the chamber, dazed, her shoulders trembling as though a cold wind were battering her. Even though the room was sealed, no one escorted her, no one offered a final word, no one looked after her with sympathy, for she had pushed herself out of that circle by committing acts no one could forgive. When the door closed behind her, the palace felt slightly lighter, as though a heavy shadow had been lifted. But inside everyone present, especially William, that relief came laced with a quiet bitterness. In a royal family, enemies do not always come from outside. Sometimes they rise from the very people once trusted the most. And with that, the monarchy turned a new page. A man who once dreamed of a very different life. Not the cold ceremonies of the royal world, Not the flashes of cameras that never fade, but a peaceful home in Africa, the laughter of children echoing through the wild. A simple family, yet complete. But now, that dream is only a memory. Prince Harry is said to be heartbroken as Chelsea Davy welcomes her third child. And, at the same time, his marriage is rumored to be facing serious strain. In March 2026, Chelsea Davy quietly welcomed her third child, a healthy baby boy named Finn, a life that many believe Harry once longed for. Stable, private, and filled with the laughter of family. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Harry's story seems to be moving in the opposite direction. Rumors about his marriage to Meghan Markle are growing more intense. Arguments, financial pressure, projects that fail to meet expectations, and most notably, disagreements about whether to return to Britain or not. The book Betrayal by Tom Bower has just been released like a new spark. It paints a darker picture than ever before. Money is no longer as abundant as it once was. Media deals are declining. And behind it all is a Harry who is said to be quietly drowning in unspoken regret. This is no longer a fairy tale. This is a modern royal tragedy. So the question is, does Harry truly regret losing Chelsea Davy? Or is this all just an exaggerated media storm? What do you think? Comment number 1 if you believe Harry still regrets Chelsea. Comment number 2 if you think he is still happy with Meghan. Stay with us, because every detail will be revealed right after this. Let us begin with the most recent news. A photo that seemed completely ordinary, yet caused a significant stir within the royal watching community. On Mother's Day in 2026, Chelsea Davy unexpectedly shared a happy moment with her 3 children. In her arms was a healthy baby boy, introduced as Finn. That is her third child. No grand statements, no official announcements, just a simple photo, but enough to make many people ask questions. And more importantly, enough to reopen a story that seemed to have been closed long ago. Because for Prince Harry, Chelsea Davy was not just an ex-girlfriend. She was once seen as the woman he truly wanted to spend his life with. Looking back, Chelsea's current life appears almost like a version of the dream Harry once spoke about. A large family, a relatively private life, and above all, the peace he always longed for but never managed to hold on to. Look at the numbers. In 2022, Chelsea welcomed her first child, Leo. 2 years later, in 2024, she gave birth to a baby girl named Chloe. And now, in 2026, Finn arrives, completing a family of 3 children that many would call ideal. 3 children in 4 years. A full and busy family rhythm, yet complete. And what stands out is that all of it happened quietly, almost without scandal, without the overwhelming media pressure that Harry once faced. Meanwhile, look at Harry himself. He and Meghan Markle now have 2 children, Archie and Lilibet. A small family, by modern standards, but what draws attention is something Harry once said. He clearly stated that having more than 2 children is irresponsible in the context of global climate change. That statement once sparked controversy, but now, placed next to the image of Chelsea happily surrounded by 3 children, it carries a very different meaning. Could it be that it was not only an environmental viewpoint, but also a compromise, a way to accept that his current life no longer resembles the dream he once had? Because if we go back in time, those who followed Harry and Chelsea's relationship know one thing. Harry once wanted a big family, not just 2 children, but 4, even 5. He spoke about living in Africa, leaving the royal system, leaving the rules behind, seeking a life close to nature, where children could grow up without constant scrutiny. And in that dream, the woman standing beside him was none other than Chelsea Davy. This was not a fleeting romance. It was a relationship that lasted for years. With breakups and reunions, a relationship deep enough for both to truly understand each other. and complicated enough that it could not reach a perfect ending. That is why, when the news of Chelsea's third child appeared, it was not just a simple happy update. It felt like a mirror, reflecting what could have been and what never came to be. Some sources say Harry has seen that photo. No public reaction, no comment, but silence sometimes speaks louder than words. Because imagine being in his position, the woman who was part of your life for years, the woman who once stood at the center of your future plans, now living the life you once dreamed of, but without you in it. That is not just regret. It is a kind of loss that is difficult to name. Meanwhile, Harry's current life appears to be under growing pressure. Media projects no longer create the same impact. Major deals are becoming quieter, and rumors of tension in his marriage to Meghan Markle continue to surface. The contrast between two worlds is becoming clearer. One side is stability, privacy, and natural growth. The other is pressure, attention, and unpredictable change. And it is precisely that contrast that makes the story more painful. Because sometimes, what haunts a person is not what they have lost. It is when they can clearly see that it still exists, still grows, still thrives in happiness. It simply no longer belongs to them. Chelsea's good news, therefore, is not just a milestone in her life. It unintentionally becomes a reminder, a very clear reminder of the path that Harry did not take. And that is exactly why, behind what seems to be a warm family photo, there can be such an emotional story hidden within. But a bigger question still remains. Why did a relationship that was once so deep fail to reach a perfect ending? What caused Harry and Chelsea, despite being together for 7 years, to be unable to stay together? To understand that, we need to go back in time, return to the years when this relationship first began, and gradually, each detail will reveal a truth far more complex than what the public once knew. If we want to understand why the story between Prince Harry and Chelsea Davies still lingers to this day, we must return to the very beginning, not when they broke up, but when everything was still simple. In 2004, Harry met Chelsea during a trip to Africa. From the very start, this was not a kind of love bound by titles or status. According to those who closely followed the relationship, including biographer Angela Levin, what attracted Harry was not appearance or background, but Chelsea's personality. She was cheerful, natural. She never tried to become part of the royal world. And most importantly, she never demanded that Harry be a perfect prince. Chelsea loved animals. She loved the wild, and she felt at ease in Africa, the place Harry always considered his emotional refuge. In Harry's eyes, that was a rare connection. Someone who understood him, not because of who he was in title, but because of who he truly was. That is what kept the relationship going for 7 years. From 2004 to 2011, but what is important is that during those 7 years, their path was not a straight line. It was an on and off relationship. They broke up, they got back together, and then they broke up again. But each time they returned, the feelings seemed to remain intact. You could call it passion, or you could call it a kind of bond that neither of them could fully let go of. However, that very freedom in the relationship became a double-edged sword. When Chelsea left to attend university, distance began to appear. Not only geographical distance, but a distance in lifestyle. While Chelsea focused on her studies and building her own life, Harry was still drawn into a cycle of parties, friends, and pressure from the media. And then, the inevitable happened. According to many sources, Harry did not remain faithful during that time. Rumors of his involvement with other women began to surface. At first, they were only whispers, but gradually, they became something Chelsea could no longer ignore. That was the turning point. Because for someone like Chelsea, love was not something to be shared. She could accept pressure. She could accept media attention. But she could not accept betrayal. And this time, When she left, things were no longer the same as before. No more coming back. No more second chances. There is a phrase that many have repeated when speaking about this relationship. Poor her, not poor him. It is not just an emotional statement, it is a rather direct assessment, because if you look at the entire story, the fault did not lie with Chelsea. She remained true to herself from beginning to end. She did not change to fit into the royal world, but she also never demanded that Harry change for her. On the other hand, it was Harry who could not maintain stability, who could not offer a clear commitment, and in the end, it was he who broke the relationship he once valued the most. The irony is that at that time, Harry may not have realized what he had lost. He continued his life, continued appearing in public, continued with other relationships, and eventually, he met Meghan Markle. Meanwhile, Chelsea chose a completely different path. She stepped away from the spotlight, built her own career, and more importantly, built a life that she could control. No drama, no controversial interviews, no tense appearances in front of the media. Just a normal life, but a stable one. And it is that stability that has led to the present. A family with 3 children, a private husband, and a life that many would call ideal. What is notable is that, according to those close to her, Chelsea shows no sign of regret about the past. No suggestive statements. No gestures that bring back old memories. She has truly moved on. And perhaps that is the biggest difference between the two. Because while Chelsea has closed that door, Harry seems, at times, to still look back. Not always clearly, not always publicly, but at certain moments, the old story resurfaces, especially when his current life encounters problems. It is a fairly common psychological pattern. When the present does not meet expectations, people tend to idealize the past. They remember the good things, and sometimes forget why everything ended. But in Harry's case, that past is not just a memory. It is a possibility that once existed, a life he could have had if he had made different choices, and that is what makes the story heavier. Because this is not about losing someone who was not right. This is about losing a relationship that many believe could have lasted, if not for mistakes from Harry himself. When placed side by side, the contrast becomes even clearer. On one side is Chelsea, stable, private, happy with her family. On the other side is Harry, still at the center of media attention, still facing controversy, and especially surrounded by rumors about his marriage. It is this contrast that leads many to ask a question. Is Harry looking back at the past truly driven by emotion? Or is it simply a natural reaction when the present does not meet expectations? Because if a person is truly happy, they rarely look back with regret, and that is the key point. If Harry were truly satisfied with his current life, if his marriage were truly solid, then the story of Chelsea would likely be nothing more than a distant memory. But reality does not appear to be that simple. Rumors of conflict, financial pressure, and disagreements over future direction continue to surface. And each time those rumors rise, the name Chelsea Davy is mentioned again, like a comparison, like a question that has never been clearly answered. So what is really happening inside the marriage between Harry and Meghan Markle? Is it truly as strong as what they have presented to the public? Or is there an entirely different story behind it? Look at the way they build their image, their messaging, their interviews, their media projects, because sometimes the truth does not lie in what is said, but in how it is told. If you only look at what is being presented publicly, you might think that everything in the world of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle is still running smoothly. But when you begin to peel back each layer of information, a very different picture starts to emerge. Let us begin with a recent article by journalist Richard Palmer. In it, the image presented is of a couple that remains highly successful. They are said to have as many as 5 projects in development with Netflix. Income is still stable, and Harry continues to maintain roles in various charitable activities. from the Invictus Games to African parks. On the surface, it sounds like a perfect story, a post-royal life filled with freedom, strong finances, and continued global influence. But the issue is this: is it truly the full picture, or just a carefully selected version presented to the public? Because, when compared with other sources, cracks begin to appear. First is the story of Netflix. The $100 million deal was once seen as their biggest turning point after leaving the royal family. But according to multiple sources, much of that value was not paid up front in cash, but depended on the performance of their projects. And reality shows that not every project has succeeded. Some programs failed to meet expectations. Some ideas were delayed or canceled. And most importantly, there is no longer clear evidence of another major deal on a similar scale. In other words, income from Netflix is no longer the stable flow it once appeared to be. Next is the Archewell organization. Initially introduced as an ambitious charity and media platform, but in recent times, there have been multiple reports suggesting that it has undergone restructuring. Staff have been reduced, some key positions have left, and activity is no longer as vibrant as in the early years. This is not a sign of an organization that is rapidly growing. On the contrary, it suggests a system that is adjusting in order to survive. The book Betrayal by Tom Bauer also adds more clarity to this picture. According to it, their financial situation is no longer as comfortable as before. The cost of maintaining their lifestyle is high. Projects are not generating proportional income, and financial pressure is becoming a factor that cannot be ignored. But perhaps the most controversial detail lies with Harry himself. According to the article, he spends about 3 hours each week on charitable activities. It sounds reasonable, but look closer. Harry is currently a patron or involved with multiple organizations. If those 3 hours are divided evenly, each organization receives only about half an hour per week, 30 minutes. That number has led many to question whether that truly reflects the level of commitment expected from someone who once represented the royal family. And notably, there was a time before when he spent only about 1 hour per week on similar activities. The increase from 1 hour to 3 hours is presented as progress. But when placed in the broader context, it reveals a different reality, that the actual level of engagement may not be as deep as the image being presented. Angela Levin, who has studied Harry closely, also offers a striking perspective. She suggests that Harry has been in a prolonged state of dissatisfaction, a sense of discontent with his current life, even if everything appears fine on the surface. According to her, Harry often falls into a pattern of self-pity, a mindset in which he consistently sees himself as a victim of circumstances. Poor me. It is not just a phrase. It reflects a psychological state. And when a person remains in that state for a long time, it can influence every decision, from work and finances to personal relationships. When all of these pieces are put together, a very different picture begins to emerge. No longer a story of remarkable success after leaving the royal family, but a journey filled with volatility, with projects that have not met expectations, an organization forced to restructure, and an individual facing pressure both internally and externally. This does not mean that everything they have done has failed. But clearly, it is not as simple as what is presented in promotional narratives. And that is the key point. In today's media landscape, stories are not told by facts alone. They are shaped by how those facts are selected and presented. A piece of information may be true, but without context, it can create a completely different impression. And in the case of Harry and Meghan, it appears that the public is being shown a carefully edited version, a version that emphasizes success, downplays difficulties, and avoids difficult questions. But the more the narrative is controlled, the more contradictions begin to appear, because reality always finds a way to surface. From underperforming projects, organizational changes, to signs of financial and psychological pressure, All of these point in the same direction, that behind the polished image lies a far more complex reality. And it is that complexity that makes the story compelling. Because this is not just the story of a famous couple, it is a story about leaving a system, seeking freedom, and confronting unforeseen consequences. But what we are seeing may only be the tip of the iceberg. Because to fully understand this story, we cannot look only at the present. We need to go back to the past, back to the time when everything began. When Harry was still part of the royal family, when expectations placed on him were very different. And especially, the stories surrounding Princess Diana. There has been a rumor that has existed for many years, that Diana once called Harry by a special name, Good King Harry. It is only a rumor, but it raises a significant question. Was Harry once expected to become a different kind of figure, to follow a different path from what we see today? And if so, what caused everything to turn in a completely different direction? There is a story that has circulated for years. A story intriguing enough, controversial enough, and open to many interpretations, that Princess Diana once called her younger son Good King Harry. At first glance, that phrase carries strong meaning. It suggests that Diana once believed Harry could become king. In some versions, it is even taken further, that she did not fully trust Prince William, that she saw something more special in Harry. But when examining the origins of the story, things are not so simple. Journalist Richard Kay, one of those close to Diana, has mentioned the phrase, but context is crucial. According to him, Diana was concerned that William, with his sensitive and somewhat reserved personality, might feel pressure about becoming king in the future. In private moments, she would sometimes joke that Harry could be a good king, but it was not a serious prediction, and certainly not a plan to replace the heir. In reality, if you look at how Diana raised her two sons, a very different picture appears. She clearly understood William's role as the elder son, as the heir to the throne. His path was almost predetermined, and rather than trying to change that, Diana focused on helping William prepare psychologically for the responsibilities ahead. With Harry, however, her approach was different. From a young age, Harry was described as energetic, impulsive, even somewhat naughty. He could be quick-tempered, struggled to control his emotions, and sometimes acted without fully thinking through the consequences. Diana recognized this, and she did not ignore it. There were periods when she took Harry to see specialists, not because he had a serious problem, but because she wanted to help him better understand and manage his emotions. This shows something very clearly. Diana did not see Harry as an alternative to William. On the contrary, she understood that Harry needed to be guided along a different path, a supporting role, a position behind the scenes, yet still important. And that is exactly the model the British royal family has maintained for generations. The heir and the supporter, when the phrase Good King Harry is placed in that context, its meaning changes completely. It is no longer a declaration, but simply a light-hearted remark, perhaps even a way to ease pressure on William. But over time, this story has been distorted. In articles, in discussions, and especially in narratives that aim to protect Harry's image. This phrase is taken out of context. It is used as evidence that Harry was once valued more highly, that he had the potential to become a better king. And from that, a new story is built. A story in which Harry is not only the one who was treated unfairly, but also the one who was deprived of a role he deserved. But when you look at reality, that story does not hold. Prince William, who was once said to be anxious about his role, now presents a completely different image. He is stable, confident, and most importantly, comfortable in his position. His marriage to Catherine has given him a solid foundation, a balanced family, and an image that the public easily accepts. William is no longer the reserved boy he once was. He has grown into his role. Meanwhile, Harry's path has taken a different direction. After his time in the military, He had an opportunity to redefine his role within the royal family. Many believed that was the period when Harry could build a positive image, an active supporter, close to the public. But instead of fully using that opportunity, Harry gradually became dissatisfied, a sense of being treated unfairly, a feeling of always standing behind. And over time, that feeling became part of the way he views the world, not as a supporter, but as someone who is overlooked. And when a person begins to see everything through that lens, every event can be interpreted in a negative way. That is when stories like Good King Harry become dangerous, because they reinforce a belief that things should have been different. But reality is not like that. Harry was not deprived of a chance to become king, because that opportunity never existed. His role, from the very beginning, was shaped in a different direction, and objectively speaking, it was not a lesser role. Many members of the royal family throughout history have built significant influence without needing the throne. The issue is not the role itself, but how that role is perceived, and it is that difference in perception that leads to different choices. William accepts his position and grows within it. Harry resists his position and seeks to create a path of his own. There is no absolute right or wrong. But clearly, the two paths have led to very different outcomes. And when looking back, stories from the past are no longer just memories. They become tools to explain the present, or in some cases, to justify the present. But the story does not end there, because tension within the royal family is not something new. It has existed for a long time. It is just expressed in different ways at different times. One of the most memorable recent moments was the walkabout after the Queen's funeral, a moment that appeared to symbolize unity, but in reality contained many unspoken tensions. If anyone still believed that tensions within the royal family were only rumors, the walkabout after the Queen's funeral made things clearer than ever. It should have been an image of unity. Two couples standing side by side, Prince William and Catherine, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, stepping out together before the public at a deeply emotional moment, but the reality was very different. According to a lip reader featured on Channel 5, what happened in that moment was far from smooth. As the two couples prepared to step out, William was said to have asked a question that surprised many. "Why are we together?" A short question, but filled with tension. Meghan's response was also notable. "Not today," a deflecting answer, as if she did not want to argue at that moment, but also did not truly resolve the issue. Meanwhile, Catherine was said to have stepped in. "Stop it. Stop arguing." Just 3 sentences, but enough to paint a heavy atmosphere behind the scenes. And that was not all. There were reports that Meghan kept the group waiting for nearly 45 minutes before appearing. The reason given was that she needed more time to prepare. But in that context, the delay was perceived very differently. It was no longer a personal matter, but an issue of coordination, of placing personal preference above a collective event. The walkabout thus became a symbol, not of reconciliation, but of cracks that had never been repaired. And if you think that was only an isolated incident, consider another example. Meghan's speech at One Young World in 2022. It was a major stage, an opportunity to inspire, a moment that many expected would deliver positive messages about community, change, and shared values. But what drew attention was the way Meghan told her story. I, and I. The repeated use of personal pronouns became an unintended focal point. Instead of centering on a collective message, the speech gradually turned into a personal narrative. According to a source from the organizing team, the backstage reaction was not positive. Someone was even reported to have said that she ruined it. It was a blunt remark, and a harsh one, but it reflects an issue that has been raised for a long time. Angela Levin is one of those who has pointed it out. According to her, Meghan tends to place herself at the center of every story, an approach she describes simply as me, me, me. It is not without reason. From interviews, media projects, to public appearances. Meghan's image is often tied to personal storytelling, her own experiences, her own emotions. That is not wrong. But when repeated too often, it creates an impression that the people around her, the organizations she represents, even the larger causes, all become a backdrop for that personal narrative. And when placed in the context of Mexit, this approach begins to reveal its limitations. After leaving the royal family, Harry and Meghan wanted to build a new image: independent, self-directed, and globally influential. But to achieve that, they need more than personal stories. They need connection, empathy, and the ability to place themselves within a larger picture. When that does not happen, projects begin to lose their appeal. Messages no longer create the level of impact that was expected, and gradually, cracks begin to appear. From small moments like a walkabout to major events like international speeches, all of it leads to the same question: does the problem lie in the circumstances or in the way they choose to respond to those circumstances? Because when looking back at the entire story, from the past with Chelsea Davy to the present with Meghan Markle, from dreams that never came true to controversies that have yet to fade, one thing becomes clear: not everything is determined by fate. Sometimes it is the choices people make and the way they tell their own story that shape the outcome. And when all the pieces are put together, the final picture becomes clearer than ever. From the most recent heartbreak, as Chelsea Davy happily welcomes her third child, a full and peaceful family, exactly like the dream Prince Harry once held, to the present reality, where his marriage to Meghan Markle is constantly surrounded by rumors of strain, from narratives built like a form of propaganda about post-royal success, with major projects and abundant income, to the gradual emergence of the truth behind it, projects falling short of expectations, organizations forced to restructure, and financial pressure that can no longer be ignored. From memories of the past, such as the rumor that Princess Diana once called her son Good King Harry, to how those details have been distorted to create a completely different story. A story that portrays Harry as someone deprived of opportunity, rather than recognizing the role he always had. And then, the moments of tension in the present, the walkabout after the Queen's funeral, the looks, the brief but loaded remarks, or speeches where personal ego overshadows the shared message. None of these are isolated events anymore. They connect into a logical chain. A man who once had everything, yet continues to look back at what he has lost. A present life filled with pressure, making the past appear more beautiful in memory, and a sense of dissatisfaction that never seems to fully disappear. Meanwhile, on the other side, Chelsea Davy chose a completely different path. No noise, no display, but stability, a large family, a private life, and perhaps a kind of peace that not everyone can easily achieve. As for Harry and Meghan, rumors of a divorce in 2026 continue to surface, especially surrounding disagreements about whether to return to Britain or not. Are they just rumors, or signs of something deeper? Perhaps the answer does not lie in a single event, but in the entire journey we have just revisited. Because in the end, this story is not only about royalty, it is about choices. And the consequences of those choices. Royal life has never truly been a fairy tale. And sometimes, the one who got away is the closest version of happiness a person once had within reach. So what do you think? Does Prince Harry truly have regrets? Comment number 1 if you believe he still regrets Chelsea. Comment number 2 if you think he is happy with Meghan. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next royal drama stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. One of the least discussed details from the early days of the royal marriage in 1981 later became the very detail that made many people rethink the entire story. Only a few days after becoming engaged to Prince Charles, Diana moved to Clarence House to begin preparing for her new life within the royal family. In the room assigned to her, she discovered a letter that had been delivered earlier. The writer was not a friend or a relative. The writer was Camilla. The content of the letter was not simply a message of congratulations. According to what Diana later told several close confidants, the letter felt more like a reminder that Camilla still existed in Charles's life. Despite the fact that he had just announced his engagement to a 20-year-old woman, at the time, the incident did not immediately become a public scandal. But according to many documents and testimonies released years later, Diana began noticing signs that she believed she needed to remember. Over the years, she told friends and people who worked closely with her that what she experienced was not only a troubled marriage, but also a confrontation with a very large system of power. According to several individuals who had contact with Diana, she recorded numerous warnings related to Camilla and the way the royal establishment managed public image, media narratives, and unfavorable stories. Some people later suggested that the number of these warnings may have reached nearly 20 separate observations. After Diana's death, these details did not disappear from public attention. In recent years, as the next generation of the royal family moved into the center of public life, many observers began looking at the story from a different perspective. Prince William, who grew up in the middle of all those upheavals, is now the direct heir to the throne. For that reason, every gesture he makes at public events is examined very carefully. One example that created widespread debate occurred during the coronation concert in 2023, celebrating King Charles. In front of tens of thousands of spectators at Windsor Castle and hundreds of millions watching around the world, William bowed to the king. However, he did not bow to Camilla. Body language expert Judy James later suggested that this moment carried symbolic meaning and could be interpreted as a silent gesture of loyalty toward his mother. If that interpretation is correct, a larger question begins to emerge. In the future, when William becomes king, he will hold the final authority over titles and roles within the royal family. That means he will also have the power to decide how Camilla's position is defined within the institution. For many observers, this raises a deeper question about whether the warnings Diana once spoke about may still be influencing decisions made by the next generation. So what do you think William will choose to do in the future? Will he maintain all of Camilla's current titles? Or will he change them when the power is in his hands? Comment 1 if you believe everything will remain the same. Or comment 2 if you think William will try to reshape that legacy. Now let us return to 1981, the moment when the first warning appeared almost immediately after Diana stepped into the royal family. The earliest warnings in Diana's story did not appear years after the marriage began. According to many sources, and the recollections of people who were close to her, they appeared almost from the very beginning. What is notable is that Diana did not simply feel them as vague suspicions. She began observing, remembering, and connecting events in a way that many people later described as the first warnings in her personal record. The first warning appeared only 2 days after Diana and Prince Charles publicly announced their engagement. When Diana moved into Clarence House to prepare for her new life, she discovered a letter in her bedroom. The sender was Camilla. The message was not a simple note of congratulations to the future wife of the heir to the throne. According to what Diana later told several trusted individuals, the tone of the letter sounded familiar with Charles and made it clear that the relationship between Camilla and him had not disappeared. For a 20-year-old woman about to enter a royal marriage watched by the entire world, this detail immediately raised a serious question. Diana later said many times that this was the moment when she first realized she was stepping into a marriage far more complicated than the public could see. The second warning appeared on what became the most famous royal wedding day of the 20th century. The wedding of Charles and Diana in 1981 was broadcast to an estimated 750 million viewers around the world. It was staged as a grand symbol of royal romance. Yet among the crowd of guests at St. Paul's Cathedral, Camilla was also present. What caught Diana's attention was not simply that presence. According to people who later spoke with her, Diana remembered very clearly the gray pillbox hat that Camilla wore that day. In several private conversations, Diana said that she noticed Camilla immediately among the crowd. For Diana, that presence felt like a reminder that Charles's previous relationship still existed even on the very day that was supposed to mark the beginning of a new marriage. Many royal biographers later argued that small details like this were what first led Diana to pay close attention to Camilla's real place in Charles's life. The third warning did not come from a major public event. It came from things Diana began hearing within social circles surrounding the royal family. According to several of her close friends, Diana discovered that she was sometimes referred to with mocking nicknames in private conversations. One of the most controversial nicknames was said to be Mad Cow. According to later interpretations by many observers, this was not simply personal teasing. It may have been a sign of a broader whisper campaign aimed at portraying Diana as emotionally unstable. In the years that followed, stories about Diana's mental health frequently appeared in the press. Many media analysts later suggested that the image of Diana as a troubled woman was reinforced through repeated leaks from circles close to the royal establishment. For Diana, hearing those nicknames made her begin to believe that the narrative about her life was being shaped in ways she could not control. The fourth warning appeared nearly a decade later and is often described as one of the rare moments when Diana directly confronted Camilla. The incident took place in 1989 at a party held at Annabel's, a well-known social club in London. According to accounts Diana later shared with several journalists and friends, she decided to approach Camilla and speak openly with her. During that conversation, Diana is believed to have said that she was fully aware of the relationship between Camilla and Charles. Camilla reportedly responded that Diana already had everything she wanted, including the love of the public and her position within the royal family. According to people who later heard Diana recount the story, that response made her realize that the relationship between Camilla and Charles was far deeper than she had ever hoped. The event at Annabel's is often described as a turning point. It showed that Diana was no longer simply observing events from a distance. She had begun confronting directly the people she believed were influencing her marriage. For many researchers who study the royal family, this moment marked the point when Diana understood that her story was not only a personal matter involving three individuals. It involved networks of relationships, social influence, and the ways in which media narratives could shape the public image of each person involved. After those events, Diana did not stop at simply remembering details. According to several former associates, she began keeping records, conversations, and personal observations about how events unfolded behind the doors of the palace. Many people later described this collection as a form of personal archive. Some even believe that Diana shared parts of these thoughts with her eldest son at a relatively early stage. If that is true, then the story of the 20 warnings is not only the memory of a mother, it may also have become part of how Prince William understands the past of his own family. That is why many observers believe that Diana's earliest warnings may still influence decisions made by the next generation. After the first signs appeared during the early years of the marriage, Diana's story entered a different phase in the middle of the 1990s. At that point, she was no longer only observing events around her. According to accounts from people who worked closely with Diana, she became increasingly aware of the importance of preserving information and warning those close to her about how her story might be distorted in the future. One detail that is often mentioned involves a conversation believed to have taken place while Prince William was studying at Eton around 1995. According to several royal biographers, Diana told friends that she wanted William to clearly understand what had happened behind the scenes of her marriage to Charles. Some sources claim that during this period, Diana shared with her eldest son various documents, notes, and personal reflections about events she believed were important. Supporters of Diana later described this as a form of personal record. According to their interpretation, the purpose was not to create resentment, but to ensure that her story would not be completely erased from the memory of the family. The next warning appeared after the book Diana. Her True Story by Andrew Morton was published in 1992. The book quickly became a media earthquake. It revealed many shocking details about the marriage between Charles and Diana, including vivid descriptions of Diana's loneliness within the royal family and the long-running relationship between Charles and Camilla. After the book was released, many observers believed that a wave of reaction began to emerge from sources close to the palace. During that period, the British press repeatedly published stories portraying Diana as overly emotional, unstable, or difficult to work with. Some media researchers later concluded that Diana's image in the press changed significantly during those years. From a beloved symbol, she gradually began to be portrayed as a figure who created difficulties for the royal establishment. The seventh warning is connected to what later became one of the most controversial media scandals in British broadcasting history. In 1995, Diana took part in the famous Panorama interview on the BBC conducted by journalist Martin Bashir. During this interview, Diana spoke publicly about her marriage for the first time and delivered the line that later became historic, saying that there were 3 people in that marriage. For many years, the interview was seen as a major turning point in the relationship between Diana and the royal family. However, in 2021, an independent investigation led by Judge John Dyson concluded that Martin Bashir had used fabricated bank statements to persuade Diana that people around her were spying on and betraying her. The Dyson report confirmed that these falsified documents were used to gain Diana's trust and convince her to participate in the interview. The conclusion caused widespread shock because it revealed that Diana had been manipulated with misleading information during an extremely sensitive moment in her life. The 8th warning appeared after the tragic event in 1997 when Diana died in a car crash in Paris. The first hours after the news was announced became one of the most chaotic moments in the modern history of the British royal family. In the years that followed, several books and accounts from figures connected to the royal circle claimed that shortly after receiving the news, Charles made a telephone call to Camilla. Some sources described the call in very personal terms, suggesting that Charles said he did not know what would happen to the two of them after this event. This detail generated controversy because it suggested that at the very moment when the world was beginning to mourn Diana, the relationship between Charles and Camilla remained a central element in his personal life. The events from the 5th to the 8th warning demonstrate that Diana's story was not only a personal tragedy, it also involved the ways information was shared, the ways public images were constructed, and how narratives about the royal family were shaped within the media. For many observers, this period laid the foundation for how the public would view the conflict between Diana and the royal establishment for decades afterward. After Diana's death, the story did not end. According to several journalists and royal biographers, internal discussions within the palace began very quickly about how Diana's legacy should be handled in the eyes of the public. It was an extremely sensitive period, as her 2 sons were still very young and appeared before the public dressed in black mourning clothes. And it was at that moment that many observers believe a new chapter began, a chapter no longer centered on the marriage between Charles and Diana, but on how Diana's history would be remembered or gradually erased from the official story of the royal family. The warnings that followed in the record, many believe Diana kept no longer focused only on the personal relationship between her, Charles, and Camilla. They were connected directly to the way each figure's public image was managed within the royal power structure and within the media. From the late 1990s onward, several biographers and investigative journalists began documenting details that suggested a broader strategy was taking shape. The 9th warning is often mentioned in investigative books about the royal family, particularly in the work of journalist Tom Bower. According to Bauer's account, after Diana's death, there were internal discussions within Charles's close circle about how to handle the media legacy of Diana. Some sources claim that meetings of this kind took place at Highgrove, Charles's private residence. According to Bauer's description, the goal of those discussions was not to completely deny Diana's image before the public, something that had become almost impossible after the global wave of mourning, but rather to gradually reshape the narrative. This meant slowly reducing Diana's central role in stories about the royal family, while at the same time creating conditions for Camilla's image to be gradually accepted again in public life. The 10th warning relates to a controversial story from the final years of the marriage between Charles and Diana. According to several biographers, Diana once believed that Tiggy Legge-Bourke, the nanny who worked closely with the two princes, had a romantic relationship with Charles. The rumors circulated for some time and created significant tension within the royal household. However, many sources later suggested that the story had been exaggerated or possibly influenced by misleading information. Some observers argue that Diana's belief in the rumor made her image more vulnerable in the media, because it allowed her to be portrayed as overly suspicious and emotionally unstable. To this day, the exact origin of that rumor remains a subject of debate among royal historians. The 11th warning concerns what some describe as early efforts to restore Camilla's image in the eyes of the public, even while Diana was still alive. Several journalists have written that during the middle of the 1990s, there were private meetings between political and media advisors to discuss ways to shift public perception of Camilla. One detail frequently mentioned is a lunch meeting between Charles and Peter Mandelson, a highly influential figure in British politics and media at that time. According to sources cited in several royal books, the discussion reportedly included ideas about rebuilding Camilla's public image over the long term. If accurate, it suggests that a communication strategy had been considered very early, even while Diana's story was still unfolding. The 12th warning relates to the speed with which the media management system surrounding the royal family reacted during moments of crisis. Some journalists have written that less than 1 hour after the news of Diana's death reached Charles, communication with media advisors had already begun. Such calls are not unusual in large institutions where every public statement must be carefully considered. However, this detail is often mentioned in investigative books to illustrate how quickly the royal image management system moved into action when faced with a global media crisis. When these 4 warnings are examined together, many observers believe they reveal a far more complex picture than the personal story often told about Diana. These events involve different elements: strategic meetings, controversial rumors, conversations with influential figures in politics and media, and the rapid response of a public relations system when a major event occurs. For many researchers of the British royal family, what matters is not only each individual event. What matters more is the way they connect within a much larger context. Diana's story is not simply the story of a failed marriage. It has become an example of how power, public image, and media influence can interact within a long-established institution such as the monarchy. According to people who were once close to Diana, she understood this quite clearly during the final years of her life. That is why many believe she did not only remember events, she also tried to ensure that her sons would understand the story from her perspective. If those accounts are accurate, then the record Diana left behind was not only a collection of personal memories, it may have become part of how Prince William understands the history of his own family. And that leads to a larger question. If Diana prepared her son to understand what had happened, is William now acting with those memories in mind? From that point forward, many observers began watching every gesture William made at public events with a new level of attention. Because if the story of Diana's warnings is real, then William may not simply be the heir to the throne. He may also be the person gradually offering an answer to the past of his mother. After reviewing the warnings, Diana is believed to have remembered throughout her life. Many observers began asking an important question: if those warnings truly existed, and if they were shared with her eldest son, are there signs that Prince William may be responding to them in the way he builds his role today? Over the past years, a series of William's public actions have often been analyzed from this perspective. The 13th warning is frequently mentioned in connection with the Heads Together campaign launched in 2016. The campaign was founded by William, Catherine, and Harry with the goal of changing the way society talks about mental health. In earlier decades, Diana's mental health had been discussed publicly in ways that caused her significant pain. During the 1990s, many newspaper stories portrayed Diana as emotionally unstable. When William and Harry placed mental health at the center of a national campaign, many media analysts argued that it was more than a typical charitable project. They suggested that the campaign partly reversed the old narrative. Instead of treating psychological struggles as a sign of weakness, the campaign emphasized that speaking openly about them was necessary. For people who closely follow Diana's history, this has often been seen as a way of reclaiming control over a narrative that had once been used against her. The 14th warning is connected to a small but deeply symbolic gesture. In the final years of her life, Diana frequently visited charities that helped homeless people, including the organization Passage in London. Images of Diana sitting and speaking with people living on the streets made a powerful impression on the British public. Many years after her death, William continued a relationship with the same organization. What drew particular attention was a visit when William brought his eldest son, Prince George, to Passage. During that visit, William signed the organization's guest book. What made the moment remarkable was that Diana had signed the same book decades earlier. The distance between the two signatures was 32 years. For many observers, William bringing George to the same place that Diana once visited was not simply another charitable appearance. It looked like a direct continuation across 3 generations, with William passing on to his son the values that Diana once represented. The 15th warning is often mentioned when discussing the coronation of King Charles in 2023. During this event, millions of people around the world followed every detail of the ceremony. In one brief moment, when members of the royal family expressed their respect to the king, William bowed to Charles. However, many observers believe that he did not perform the same gesture toward Camilla. Several body language experts, including Judy James, later analyzed the video of the ceremony and suggested that William performed what they described as selective bowing. According to their interpretation, the gesture showed respect for the king but did not necessarily extend to other figures. Some observers believe the action carried symbolic meaning because it took place during an extremely public moment. Although interpretations differ, the detail became a topic of debate for many months after the ceremony. The 16th warning relates to the relationship between William and his younger brother, Prince Harry. After the well-known interview between Harry and Meghan and Oprah Winfrey in 2021, tensions between the Sussex family and the rest of the royal household became the focus of global attention. In the official statement released by the palace following the interview, William was one of the few members of the royal family who spoke directly to the press when asked about the situation. He said that the family was not a racist family and emphasized that he would still speak with his brother. Although the statement was brief, many analysts believe it showed an effort to balance 2 responsibilities. One was protecting the institution of the monarchy. The other was maintaining a personal relationship with Harry. Considering that Diana often spoke about the importance of her 2 sons always protecting each other, some observers believe William's response reflected his awareness of that role. The 17th warning relates to the way the new generation of the royal family handles personal information in front of the public. When Catherine, the Princess of Wales, announced that she was undergoing cancer treatment, the news was shared directly with the public through a personal video message. Instead of allowing months of speculation in the press, The Wales family chose to speak openly about her health condition. Many commentators believe that this approach reflects a level of transparency rarely seen in the history of the British royal family. In the past, the health of royal family members was usually kept private and revealed only when necessary. Some observers believe this more open communication style resembles the way Diana spoke with the public during the final years of her life. When she chose to address personal issues directly, rather than allowing anonymous sources to define her story. When these actions are placed side by side, many royal researchers believe a clear pattern begins to appear. William rarely speaks publicly about the controversies of the past. He seldom refers directly to the conflicts between his mother and the royal establishment. Yet in many situations, his actions appear to highlight the values that Diana once represented: concern for mental health, direct engagement with charitable organizations, personal connections with people living on the margins of society, and a more open way of communicating with the public. For this reason, some observers believe William is shaping his public image in a way that both respects the traditions of the monarchy and continues the personal legacy of Diana. For those who believe the story of the warnings Diana once recorded, these actions are often interpreted as deliberate steps, not emotional reactions, but strategic choices in how William may be shaping the future of the royal family. However, those public actions are not the moments that attracted the most attention. For many years, William has usually kept a distance from deeply personal interviews. He rarely stands before cameras to speak directly about emotions connected to his mother. Yet, there have been moments when William stood alone before a camera and spoke in a way that convinced many people that Diana's story still remains very present in his mind. And it is those moments that have led the public to ask whether Diana's warnings might still influence the way William sees the future of the royal family. The 18th warning is often mentioned when discussing the rare moment when Prince William stepped forward publicly to speak about what happened to his mother. This moment occurred in 2021 after the independent investigation, led by Judge John Dyson, was released. The report re-examined how BBC journalist Martin Bashir obtained the panorama interview with Diana in 1995. For many years, the panorama interview had been considered one of the most important moments in British media history. In that interview, Diana spoke openly for the first time about her marriage to Charles and about the relationship between Charles and Camilla. Her words quickly spread around the world and became a central part of how the public understood the story of the royal family. However, the Dyson report changed the way this entire event was viewed. According to the findings of the report, Martin Bashir used fabricated documents, including false bank statements, to convince Diana that certain people around her were receiving money to spy on and betray her. These documents reportedly led Diana to believe that she was being monitored by a larger network of individuals. The report also concluded that the BBC had failed to properly investigate Bashir's actions at the time and had missed several opportunities to uncover the truth. When the Dyson report was released, the BBC was forced to acknowledge that the process used to secure the interview had not met the journalistic standards the organization claimed to follow. Shortly after the report became public, Prince William released a brief video statement. What caught the attention of many observers was not only the content of the message, but also the way it was delivered. William stood alone in front of the camera. There was no interviewer. There were no visible notes in front of him, and he directly mentioned the BBC by name during his remarks. In that statement, William said that the BBC had failed his mother. He argued that the way the interview had been obtained contributed to the fear and confusion Diana experienced during the final years of her life. He also stated that the panorama interview damaged the relationship between Diana and the royal family at an extremely sensitive moment. For many media analysts, the fact that a senior member of the royal family publicly criticized the BBC so directly was highly unusual. Within the traditions of the British royal family, senior members usually avoid openly criticizing major media organizations. They typically communicate through written statements or through advisors. For that reason, William standing alone before the camera and speaking so directly about the issue was interpreted by many observers as a sign of how serious the matter appeared in his view. Another detail also drew attention from analysts. In his statement, William did not speak only about the effect of the interview on Diana. He also emphasized that dishonest practices in journalism damage public trust in the media as a whole. According to him, when ethical standards are broken, the consequences do not stop with one individual or one family. They affect the entire information system on which society depends. For many people who study the history of Diana, this statement carried meaning beyond a simple response to the Dyson report. It was seen as an attempt to correct part of the story about the final years of Diana's life. For decades, the Panorama interview had often been described as an example of Diana choosing to break the silence surrounding the royal family. But after the Dyson report, the narrative became more complex. It raised questions about how much Diana may have been influenced by misleading information at the moment when she decided to participate in that interview. This is why, when William said that the BBC had failed his mother, many commentators believed he was trying to close a long chapter in his family's media history, not by denying what Diana had said, but by restoring the context of that interview. In this interpretation, William's statement was not only the personal response of a son, it was also a declaration about how the new generation of the royal family wants to look back at the events that shaped Diana's image in the eyes of the public. That moment also revealed something else. William was willing to step forward in public and speak directly about issues that had once been considered too sensitive for the royal family. It reflected a different style of leadership from many earlier generations, when royal figures usually remained silent and allowed advisors to manage media crises. And that approach led to another question that many people began to ask. If William was willing to challenge a major media institution like the BBC when he believed his mother had been treated unfairly, then how would he use his authority if he one day became king? Because in the future, William will not only be the guardian of Diana's legacy, he will also hold real influence within the structure of the royal family. And that leads to another question: what that authority could mean for the position and title of Camilla in the years ahead. When looking back across the entire chain of events that stretches from the early 1980s until today, many observers believe the story of Diana does not end in the past. It is also directly connected to the future of the British monarchy. And it is at this point that the final two warnings are often mentioned in discussions about the legacy Diana left behind. The 19th warning concerns a very specific element in the structure of royal power: titles. In the British monarchy, royal titles are not only ceremonial symbols, they are closely tied to the position of each figure within the hierarchy of the court. At present, Camilla holds the title of Queen Consort, meaning the wife of the reigning king. That title exists because she is the wife of King Charles. However, within the line of succession, when a king dies and a new monarch ascends the throne, the entire structure of titles around the court is adjusted. This means that when William becomes king, Camilla's position will change. By tradition, the widow of a king is often known as the Queen Dowager, meaning the widowed queen. The title carries respect and ceremony, but it no longer comes with a central role within the court. The woman who will hold the position of queen when William takes the throne will be his wife Catherine, the Princess of Wales. For that reason, many analysts believe that the future transfer of power will naturally place Camilla in a different role from the one she holds today. However, what draws public attention to this subject is not only tradition. In a modern monarchy, the monarch holds considerable influence over how titles are used in practice. This means that when William becomes king, he will have an important voice in determining the public roles of other members of the royal family. Some observers believe this is exactly why many people think Camilla's future will depend heavily on how William chooses to shape his reign. For many years, William has avoided speaking directly about this subject. He rarely comments on Camilla during public interviews. However, scholars of the royal family believe the way he has built his public image may offer some clues about the future. William has repeatedly emphasized that the royal family should become more streamlined, more focused on core duties, and less involved in unnecessary controversies. If that direction continues when he becomes king, the structure of the royal court in the future could look very different from today. The 20th warning is often mentioned in the broader context of the relationship between Diana and her eldest son. In many conversations recorded by biographers and close friends, Diana reportedly said that she believed William would become a different kind of king from those who came before him. She is said to have told several people that William understood very clearly how the public views the monarchy and that he would know how to balance tradition and change. For those who believe in the story of the warnings Diana is said to have recorded, this idea carries special meaning. In their interpretation, Diana was not only trying to protect herself in the final years of her life, she was also trying to prepare her son with a different understanding of power and responsibility. A perspective in which empathy for the public, transparency, and the ability to face the media openly are considered essential qualities of a modern leader. If we look at what William has done over the past 2 decades, many people believe he is indeed building his public image in that direction. He has taken part in social campaigns related to mental health. He has continued charitable work that Diana once championed. And at certain key moments, he has been willing to speak directly about issues that the royal family once avoided discussing. Because of this, some commentators believe the biggest question is not whether William will follow Diana's warnings. The real question is how he will use his authority when he becomes king. Because when that moment arrives, William will not only be the heir to the throne, he will be the person with the power to shape the official story of the royal family for the next generation. And within that picture, Camilla's position may become one of the most closely watched elements. Because when Charles is no longer the head of the court, Camilla's current title will naturally change according to the rules of succession. Many observers believe she may have to wait until that moment to know exactly how her role will be defined during William's reign. That leads to another observation often mentioned in discussions about the future of the monarchy. While Diana is no longer here to witness these changes, her son is gradually stepping into the most powerful position within the system she once had to confront. And when William eventually becomes king, many people believe the final question about Diana's legacy will no longer belong to the past. It will become part of the future that William himself will decide. So the final question still lies ahead. When William one day becomes king, which path will he choose for his reign? What do you think will happen? Comment 1 if you believe every title will remain exactly as it is today. Or comment 2 if you believe major changes are still waiting in the future. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to watch the next video. Our next topic will be 20 things Camilla could lose when King Charles dies. Thank you for watching. And remember one thing. In history, the truth often takes a very long time. But in the end, it always finds its way back. For years, the public has always believed that Prince William had only one sibling, Prince Harry. But recently, shocking rumors have begun circulating within royal circles. William once had a secret sister, and the reason she was never revealed to the world is far darker than anyone imagined. Sources from inside the palace claim that her existence was deliberately hidden for decades, buried beneath political calculations and the fear of damaging the image of the royal family. And the most astonishing part, Prince William himself has reportedly broken his silence, confirming that this lost sister is indeed real. So, what made William decide to speak up now? Is this the result of a family secret that has been buried for far too long? Or a consequence of power struggles behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace? And more importantly, who exactly is this mysterious sister? And why was she forced to live in the shadows of the crown? These questions have sent shockwaves throughout Britain. Could this be the biggest royal cover-up in modern history? One that might change the way the world sees the family of King Charles forever? But what do you think? If this revelation turns out to be true, do you believe the royal family had the right to hide one of their own? A blood relative, just to protect their public image? Share your thoughts in the comments. But because today's story will make you question everything you thought you knew about the House of Windsor. The palace was quiet, wrapped in the kind of silence that only came when the duties of the day were done and the corridors stood still. Inside Kensington Palace, the air carried a soft warmth. The laughter of children had faded. The gentle voice of Kate had settled into silence. And the ticking of the old clock was the only sound that dared to interrupt the night. Prince William sat alone in his study, a pen resting between his fingers, his eyes fixed on the window where the lights of London shimmered faintly. The world saw him as calm, steady, a man born into responsibility and molded by duty. They called him the future king. Strong, reliable, everything the monarchy needed him to be. But behind that quiet strength, something else lived. Something that had followed him for decades, like a shadow that never left his side. Every morning, he rose before dawn, helped his children get ready, tied little shoelaces, smiled at their innocent laughter, and kissed Kate goodbye before stepping out to face the waiting cameras. His smile was perfect, his gestures graceful. He greeted the world with that familiar warmth, the same one his mother once carried. Yet, when the cameras turned away, that smile faded into something softer, almost tired. Kate had seen it many times. She knew the difference between the public calm of her husband and his private quiet. It was in the way his eyes lost focus sometimes, like he was looking at something no one else could see. It was in the nights when he would sit by the window long after she had gone to bed, a cup of untouched tea beside him, his gaze distant and heavy. "Will?" she would ask gently, touching his arm. "Are you all right?" He would smile and nod. Always the same answer. "Just thinking. Darling. Go on. I will be up soon." But even she knew he was not just thinking. He was remembering. When the palace grew still and the moonlight spilled across the study walls, William would unlock a small wooden box hidden in the corner of his desk. Inside were pieces of a past that had never truly let him go. A handful of letters written in the handwriting of his mother, a few old photographs, and one faded hospital bracelet. The bracelet, tiny and fragile, had a name barely visible after so many years. He would hold it gently, his thumb brushing over the letters, as if the warmth of his touch could bring back what time had taken away. That box was his secret world, one that no official papers, no royal speeches, and no public duties could touch. Sometimes he would read the letters again, even though he had memorized every word. They were not love letters or formal notes. They were fragments of thoughts, things Diana had written late at night, words filled with longing and confusion. Some spoke of dreams for her boys. Others hinted at something deeper, something left unfinished. Each time he read them, he felt his heart twist in a way he could not explain. There was always a sense of someone missing, someone who should have been part of their story but never was. Family gatherings often brought that feeling to the surface. When the children played, when laughter filled the rooms, or when birthdays came around, he found himself growing quiet. There was always a moment when his gaze drifted away, his mind traveling to places no one else could follow. Kate would notice it and reach for his hand, grounding him back to the present. He was grateful for her patience, her understanding, and her silence. She never pushed, never demanded answers. She simply stayed beside him the same way Diana had stayed beside him during the storms of his childhood. But deep down, she knew there was something her husband had never spoken of, a chapter of his heart sealed away long before she came into his life. Tonight, however, was different. The weight he had carried for years felt heavier than ever. The day had been filled with the usual smiles and public grace. But when the last light went out in the corridor, he found himself unable to escape the pull of memory. He opened the box once more. The bracelet lay there, glowing faintly in the moonlight. It was so small, made for the wrist of a newborn. He traced the faint letters again. The handwriting of his mother came back to him. The way she wrote his name with love, her voice whispering, "Never forget kindness." "My darling boy." He swallowed hard, his chest tightening as old emotions rose like waves. He remembered the night he found that box for the first time, tucked among the belongings of Diana years after her death. He had not understood then, not fully. But now he did. Every letter, every silence, every look his mother gave him before she left. They all made sense. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes burning. The page before him was blank, but his heart was overflowing. He picked up his pen and began to write. "My dearest," he started softly, his hand trembling. "There are things the world was never meant to know, but I can no longer carry them alone." The words came slowly, painfully, like drops of truth spilling after years of silence. He wrote about the weight of duty, about how the crown demanded perfection while the heart begged for honesty. He wrote about Diana, her warmth, her laughter, her sadness, and then about the secret she had carried, the one that haunted her even in her happiest days. As his pen moved, the air around him seemed to grow heavier. It was not just a letter, it was a confession, a release of everything he had buried deep within himself. He paused for a moment, staring at the bracelet beside the page. "You were never meant to be forgotten," he whispered, his voice trembling. The room felt smaller, filled with the ghosts of memories he had spent years trying to silence. He could almost hear the voice of Diana again, gentle and comforting. He could see her smile, the way she looked at him and Harry with so much love, as if her entire world was in their eyes. But beneath that love, he now saw the sorrow, the part she never shared with the public. He wrote for hours. The night deepened, and the palace slept. But his words flowed endlessly. Each sentence felt like a wound opening, but also like healing. He wrote of the hidden pain behind royal walls, of the laughter that sometimes felt forced, of the long years of silence that followed the death of his mother. When the final words were written, he signed his name quietly. The ink shimmered under the light. Still wet, still alive. He folded the paper gently, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it. As dawn approached, William stood by the window, holding the letter close. The sky was soft pink now, and the city began to stir. He looked out at the sleeping gardens, the place his mother had once walked, and whispered, "I kept my promise. Mom." He placed the envelope beside the photo of Diana on his desk and returned the bracelet to the box. Then, closing it carefully, he locked it again. The secret was safe. But the truth, at least in words, had finally been spoken. Kate entered quietly a few minutes later, her eyes still soft with sleep. "You did not come to bed," she said gently. He turned, smiling faintly. "I had something I needed to finish." She looked at the letter, at the calm in his eyes, and nodded. She did not ask. The palace had always felt large, but after the death of Diana, it became unbearable. The walls seemed to echo with silence, every step too loud, every breath too heavy. The laughter that once filled the halls was gone, replaced by the stillness of grief. Curtains were drawn tighter, voices softer, and even the air felt colder, as though the light had left with her. Prince William was just a boy, but he carried himself like a man who had already lived 1,000 lives. His younger brother Harry clung to him for comfort, and William tried to be strong, tried to hold the world together the way his mother once did. but nothing could hide the emptiness that followed them everywhere. At breakfast, in the chapel, in the long, lonely nights, he often sat alone by the window in his room, staring at the gardens where his mother used to walk. He remembered her voice, her laughter, the way she would call his name from across the lawns. But more than that, he remembered something else, something strange that had never left his mind. Sometimes she spoke in riddles, her voice barely a whisper. "There are things, William," she would say softly, "things they do not want spoken about." At the time, he thought she meant politics, scandals, the usual secrets that came with being royal. The world was always watching, and the palace was always hiding something. But the way she said it felt different, almost personal. One evening, she had stayed longer than usual. The house was asleep, and only the soft ticking of the clock filled the room. She looked at him with a strange sadness, her eyes glistening under the dim light. "Promise me," she said, her voice shaking, "that you will always look for the truth, no matter how long it takes." He nodded, confused but sincere. "I promise." "Mom," she smiled faintly, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Good boy." Those words would haunt him later. After her death, memories became his only comfort and his deepest pain. The palace, once alive with her warmth, turned into a house of whispers. He remembered her laughter echoing down the halls. As he grew older, small things began to resurface in his mind, and fragments of conversations, things he had not understood then, but now played over like puzzles waiting to be solved. He remembered once walking past her study when she did not know he was there. Her voice was hushed, trembling. She was speaking to her closest friend, one who had always been by her side during difficult times. "They think I will forget," Diana said quietly, "but I cannot. I hear her in my dreams sometimes. I see her face." William froze, too afraid to move, too curious to turn away. The voice of her friend was low, concerned. "You have to be careful. Di, they will never let you talk about it." "I know," his mother whispered, her voice breaking, "but she is my child, too." The heart of William had pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He had no idea what they meant. A child? Who was she talking about? He had wanted to run in to ask. But something held him back. Maybe fear. Maybe instinct. That night, he could not sleep. His mind raced with questions. Had he heard it wrong? Was his mother talking about the child of someone else? The next morning, she acted as though nothing had happened. She made pancakes, laughed with Harry, and asked William about school. Her smile was warm, but her eyes carried a quiet ache he had not noticed before. As the months passed, he began noticing small things he had never paid attention to before. His mother often disappeared for hours without explanation. When she returned, her eyes were red, her face pale. Sometimes he saw envelopes on her desk, sealed with no address. Once he found a photograph tucked inside one of her books, a picture of a baby girl wrapped in a pink blanket. On the back, in the handwriting of his mother, were the words, "My little one." When he showed her the photo later, she froze for a moment before smiling faintly and taking it from him. "Where did you find this, darling?" she asked gently. "In your book," he replied. Still curious. "Who is she?" Diana did not answer. She simply pulled him into her arms, holding him tighter than usual. "One day you will understand." "My darling," she whispered into his hair. But not yet. He never forgot that moment. The way her voice trembled. The way her tears fell silently on his shoulder. Years passed. Time carried him away from boyhood and into the strict, structured world of royal duty. But no amount of protocol could erase what he had heard. The whispers, the photograph, the tears. They stayed with him, locked in a corner of his heart that he rarely opened. When he lost his mother, he lost the chance to ask her the questions that haunted him. At her funeral, standing beside Harry, he looked at her coffin and felt the crushing weight of everything left unsaid. "Who were you talking about?" "Mom?" He wanted to cry out. But all that came was silence. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, he could almost hear her voice again. There are things they do not want spoken about. Now, as an adult, those words echoed louder than ever. He had grown into the man the world expected him to be. Composed, loyal, calm, but inside, a question still burned. Who was the one they did not speak of? He began to see the world through the eyes of his mother, the way she had fought for truth, the way she had challenged silence. He realized that her sorrow was not just about her marriage or the crown. It was deeper. It was about loss. A loss the world never knew existed. He often returned to his childhood room at Kensington Palace, now restored, but still carrying traces of the past. Sometimes he would sit by the same window where he once watched his mother walk in the garden. The trees had grown taller, the flowers different, but the memories remained. He would close his eyes and remember the warmth of her hand, the sound of her laugh, the way she called him, "my darling boy," and then her final whisper, "One day you will understand." Now he did. It was not about royal scandals or family mistakes. It was about love, a love that had been hidden, silenced, buried beneath palace walls. His mother had carried a secret that broke her heart, a truth she could never speak aloud. As he stood there, staring into the fading light of evening, he felt tears sting his eyes. For years he had tried to protect her memory, to hold on to the part of her that belonged only to him and Harry. But now he understood that there was another part, one the world had never seen. He whispered softly into the empty room, "I know now. Mom, I finally understand." The words hung in the air like a promise. The palace was still, the night quiet, but somewhere deep within its walls, the echoes of her voice lingered. Gentle, warm, eternal. The afternoon sun poured softly through the attic window at Anmer Hall, lighting up dust motes that danced lazily in the air. The air smelled faintly of cedar and thyme, the kind of scent that carried the quiet weight of memories. Stacks of old letters, photo albums, and carefully folded clothes surrounded her. She smiled as she lifted a faded scarf from one box, pressing it gently against her cheek. "She must have loved this color," she murmured, her voice soft. It was then her fingers brushed against something different. A small wooden box tucked beneath a pile of yellowed papers. It was plain but carefully crafted, its edges smooth, its lock faintly golden. Kate tilted it toward the light and noticed a tiny emblem engraved on the lid, a single letter D. Her heart gave a small, curious thump. When she opened it, the hinges creaked faintly, as if resisting the light after years of stillness. Inside lay a small diary bound in pale leather, its pages edged with gold. The lock was delicate but broken, and when she lifted it, she froze. The handwriting was neat, slanted, unmistakable. It was the diary of Diana. Kate caught her breath in her throat. She held it like something sacred, afraid even to turn the pages, the quiet of the attic pressing around her. Then she whispered, "William needs to see this." When William entered later that evening, his shirt sleeves rolled up. His eyes softened at the sight of her sitting by the attic window. "You have been up here all day," he said gently. "What did you find?" Kate looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Something you should see." She handed him the diary. The moment his eyes met the cover, he stopped. His heart began to race. This was hers. Kate nodded. He ran his fingers over the worn leather, his hands trembling slightly. For a while, he could not open it. The sight of the handwriting of his mother, so familiar, so full of life, stirred something deep within him. It had been years. Yet her memory lived in every part of him. Finally, with a deep breath, he opened the first page. The ink had faded in places, but her voice was there, alive, gentle and haunting. April 1979. It began. The palace feels colder each day. I wonder if this is what loneliness truly feels like. Surrounded by gold, but starved of warmth. The eyes of William moved across the words slowly, each one like a whisper from the past. Diana had written about her early days before marriage, her quiet walks in the gardens, the expectations placed upon her, the way her laughter was measured by watchful eyes. Then came the entry that made him catch his breath. June 1980. They told me she did not make it. They said it was better this way. But my heart does not believe them. I felt her. I heard her first cry. And then nothing. I asked to see her, to hold her. But they refused. They said it was best for me to rest, to forget. But how does a mother forget? The hand of William began to shake. The words blurred. He looked up at Kate. His voice barely a whisper. She wrote this before I was born. The eyes of Kate filled with quiet sorrow. Keep reading, she said softly. He turned the page, each line cutting deeper. August 1980. I am told to move on. They say it was a tragedy that must stay private, that it would hurt the monarchy. But I cannot sleep. I keep dreaming of her face. I wake up with my hands reaching for someone who is not there. Tears welled in the eyes of William. The diary did not read like a royal document. It read like the heart of a young woman breaking in silence. Diana had been so full of light, but beneath that light, there had been so much pain. A pain she had hidden behind her smile. He turned to another entry, dated a few weeks later. I remember her hand. Tiny. Warm. For just a second, then they took her. I have been told not to speak of it, to act as if it never happened. But I know what I felt. I know she existed. William stared at the page for a long time. The words swam before him, his mind spinning. A daughter. His mother had written about a daughter. He whispered the words aloud, barely able to breathe. She thought she had a baby girl. Kate reached for his hand, her touch steady and warm. Maybe she truly did. She said softly. She would not have imagined something like that. He flipped through the rest of the pages. The handwriting became shakier, the tone heavier. Diana had written about sleepless nights, about how those around her dismissed her pain, how she was told to smile and carry on for the sake of the royal image. The next page was blank. The diary ended there abruptly, just before her wedding to Prince Charles. William stared at that empty page as though expecting more words to appear. But there was nothing. Just silence. He closed the diary slowly, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. This is not just a rumor, he said quietly. She really believed she had lost a child. Kate nodded, her eyes full of emotion. I cannot imagine what she went through to carry something like this and never be allowed to speak of it. He leaned back in his chair, his face pale. His hand still trembled as he held the diary close, as though afraid it might vanish. All these years, he murmured. I thought I knew everything about her. But this changes everything. Kate moved closer, her hand resting gently on his arm. Maybe she wanted you to find it, she said softly. Maybe she wanted you to know she never stopped loving her children. All of them. He looked at her, his eyes distant but full of feeling. It hurts to think she carried that alone. For a long time, they sat in silence. The golden light from the attic window spilled across the floor, illuminating the diary between them. A small, delicate thing holding a secret too heavy for words. William finally placed it back in the wooden box, his fingers lingering over the cover. He whispered, almost to himself, She always said she hated secrets. Maybe this was the one she could not bear to tell. As Kate watched him close the lid, she saw the change in his expression. The quiet grief, the shock, and something else beneath it. Understanding. He stood, the box still in his hands. The evening light was fading now, casting a soft glow over the attic walls. She always followed her heart, he said quietly. Even when it led her into pain, they left the attic hand in hand. The box pressed close to his chest. The truth had been hidden for decades, sealed within the fragile pages of the diary of a mother, and though it left him shaken, it also brought him closer to her, closer than he had ever felt before. As they descended the stairs, William glanced back once more at the attic door. He whispered into the dim light, "I found you. Mom, I finally understand the secret." Uncovering the truth, the quietness of the night inside Anmer Hall was broken only by the gentle ticking of the clock. The fire had dimmed to soft embers, casting a warm, sleepy glow over the sitting room. Prince William sat alone, his fingers tracing the rim of a teacup he had not touched in an hour. Across the hall, Kate had fallen asleep after reading bedtime stories to the children. Yet the mind of William was far from rest. His thoughts circled back to the secret that had shaken his world to its core. A secret buried for decades beneath royal silence. It had been only a few weeks since he discovered the diary. Since then, nothing felt the same. The air at Anmer Hall seemed heavier, and even laughter from his children sounded like echoes of something fragile. He had not spoken about it. Not to Harry. Not even to Kate. Since that night, she found the box. But something inside him had changed. He decided to find answers on his own. No press. No palace advisors. No official letters. Just him. A son desperate to uncover the truth about the words of his mother. He began discreetly making quiet phone calls from his private study. His tone was calm, but his hands often trembled as he held the receiver. "I am looking for someone who worked with my mother during her early years," he would say, careful not to reveal too much. He reached out to old staff lists, former aides, and even retired hospital workers. Some declined to speak. Others claimed they remembered nothing. But one name kept appearing: Nurse Alice Hampton. Alice had been a young midwife in the early 1980s, stationed near a private royal residence. She was long retired now, living quietly by the sea in Devon. The private secretary of William arranged the meeting under another name. The drive down was long and silent. The countryside rolled past like a memory he could not touch. He remembered the voice of his mother, the softness of her laugh, the way she had once told him, "One day you will understand." My darling, those words had haunted him since childhood. But now they guided him. When he arrived at the small cottage, the sea breeze carried a scent of salt and quietness. Alice answered the door slowly, her frail frame wrapped in a thick cardigan. Her eyes widened slightly when she recognized him, though she said nothing. Instead, she invited him inside, her voice trembling. "I thought you might come one day." William sat across from her at a wooden table, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. "I need to ask you something," he said softly. "About my mother." The hands of the woman fidgeted with her teacup. "Your mother was kind," she whispered. "So kind. Too kind for what they did to her." The throat of William tightened. What did they do? For a long time. The only sound was the wind brushing against the windows. Then Alice looked at him with watery eyes and said, "You are not the first child she carried." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. William froze, his mind struggling to process them. "You mean she was very young?" Alice continued. "Barely prepared. They told her it was too early, that it was not safe, that the world was not ready to see it. The pregnancy was hidden. Only a few of us knew. When the baby came, it was premature. A little girl. William felt his pulse hammering. They said it would ruin everything. So they arranged for her to be taken quietly, raised under another name. The room seemed to blur. The chest of William ached as though his heart was being crushed. She lived? His voice was barely audible. Yes, Alice whispered. I do not know what became of her after. I was told to leave. Dismissed not long after. But I remember the face of your mother, the way she screamed for her baby, the way they sedated her to stop her from knowing. She never gave up believing the child was alive. William lowered his head, pressing his fingers to his eyes as tears burned behind them. All his life, he had wondered why the sadness of his mother felt deeper than anyone could explain. Now he knew Diana had been haunted not just by a failed marriage or the press or royal duty, but by a loss that was not truly a loss. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Why did no one ever tell me? Because the truth, Alice said softly, was never meant to leave the walls of the palace. When he left the cottage, the air felt different. The waves crashed against the shore like they were echoing the cries of his mother from long ago. He stood there for a long time, staring at the horizon, feeling a strange mixture of grief and fury. The royal image, that polished, untouchable world, had stolen more than freedom. It had stolen love, truth, and a sister he had never known existed. That night, William could not sleep. He sat in his study, the old diary lying open before him. He read the words of his mother again, tracing each line with his fingers. They told me she was gone, but I feel her still. Somewhere out there, she is breathing, and I hope she knows I loved her. He closed the diary, resting his forehead against it. I will find her. Mom, he whispered, I promise. But as the days passed, he realized that finding her would not be simple. Every record, every document from that time had been carefully erased. Files were missing. Names changed. It was as though someone had built a wall around the truth. Brick by brick, William began to understand the weight of silence. The same silence that had broken his mother. Each time he smiled in public, each time he stood beside his family for photos, he felt the ache grow deeper. The world saw a prince who had everything. But inside he was a man carrying the ghosts of two. The mother who lost her child and the sister he never knew. One evening, as the rain poured softly against the palace windows, Kate entered the study. She found him staring at the diary again. You cannot carry this alone, she said gently. He looked up, eyes tired. If I tell anyone, it could destroy everything. Kate knelt beside him, taking his hand. But hiding it is destroying you. William said nothing. He only stared into the fire, the flickering light reflecting in his eyes, somewhere in the silence. He could almost hear the voice of his mother, gentle, warm, filled with love. That night, he walked to the window and looked out into the dark gardens below. The world outside was peaceful, but inside, his heart was a storm. He now understood why Diana had been restless, why her eyes often looked far away. Even when she smiled, she had been searching for the truth, for the daughter she never got to hold, and now her son would do the same. The secret that the palace buried would no longer stay hidden, not while he was alive to speak for the sister they stole from the shadows. The sister in the shadows. The sky over Norfolk was painted in shades of silver and gray, the kind of day that carried both peace and sorrow in its silence. Inside Anmer Hall, Prince William sat alone by the window, watching the rain trace slow paths down the glass. Months had passed since he uncovered the secret of his mother, the hidden truth that had changed everything he thought he knew about his family. But just when he thought the pain had settled, a new letter arrived, one that made his hands tremble as he broke the seal. It came from a private law firm in London. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, neat but hesitant. Inside was a short note from a solicitor claiming to represent a woman who believed she had ties to the late Princess Diana. The letter was careful in its tone, stating confidential royal medical file dated before your birth. William read the line again and again, his chest tightening with every word. He folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the diary of Diana, the one that had started everything. It cannot be, he whispered to himself, though part of him already knew it could. After days of silence and thought, he made his decision. There would be no palace involvement, no advisors, and no headlines. This was something he had to face alone. A week later, on a quiet morning, he drove out of the city, disguised in a plain jacket and cap, leaving the royal world far behind. The meeting place was a small countryside cafe tucked between rolling fields. Its sign was faded, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. When he walked in, his heart pounded so hard he could barely breathe. She was already there, sitting near the corner window. The woman rose as he approached. Her hair was soft and golden brown, her features gentle, but it was her eyes that stopped him. Blue. The same deep, kind blue he had seen every time he looked at old photos of his mother. For a long moment, neither spoke. William finally whispered, "You look familiar." Her voice trembled as she replied, "I have seen you on television my whole life, but I never imagined this day would come." They sat, the silence heavy but not cold. Slowly, she began to tell her story. She had been adopted as a baby, raised by kind people who had little to offer but love. All her life, she had carried a sense of not belonging, a feeling that her story had been erased before it began. Years later, when she searched for her birth records, she found fragments that did not fit. A birth under protection. A sealed file marked Royal Medical Record. As she spoke, tears filled the eyes of William. Every word, every memory echoed the truth he had already begun to accept. "I do not know what to say," he whispered. She smiled softly. "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted to know if I was real." If she was real, William reached across the table, his hand shaking as he took hers. "She was real," he said quietly, "and she loved you." She never stopped. They sat for hours, talking about life, about what could have been. She told him about her small home by the sea, her work at a hospice for children, her simple, quiet life, far from the chaos of royalty. William listened, his heart torn between peace and sorrow. Every gesture, every smile reminded him of Diana. The warmth, the gentleness, even the tilt of her head. It was like seeing a part of his mother reborn. As the sun began to set, the cafe emptied. William knew he could never make this public. The monarchy was fragile, and a revelation like this could tear it apart. But he also knew he could not walk away. He looked into her eyes and said softly, "You will never be alone again. I promise." She nodded, tears spilling silently. "I do not want anything from you," she whispered, "just to know I am not forgotten." William stood and embraced her, holding her as if he could shield her from every storm that had ever touched their family. "You are not forgotten," he murmured. "You are part of us, even if the world cannot know." When he left the cafe, the night air was cool and still. He looked up at the sky, where stars were just beginning to appear, and felt a strange calm settle over him. Somewhere, he believed, Diana was watching, smiling through the dark, proud that her two children had finally found each other, even if in secret. As William drove away, he knew life would return to its royal rhythm. The cameras, the duties, the careful smiles, but deep inside, something had changed forever. He now carried a truth that no crown, no throne, no royal decree could ever erase. The soft glow of a London evening fell across the study of Prince William, painting the room in shades of gold and quiet sorrow. The house was still. The laughter of his children had faded upstairs. and Kate had gone to bed hours earlier. But William remained, seated at his desk, a blank page before him, and a pen trembling between his fingers. It had taken him years to find the courage for this moment. Tonight, the weight of everything he carried pressed down on him. The hidden truth of the sister lost to time was no longer just a secret. It was part of who he was, and part of what his children would one day need to understand. He began to write slowly, carefully, each word drawn from the deepest corners of his heart. This was not a letter to the world. It was not meant for newspapers or historians or royal archives. It was a letter for his children. A message meant to find them when they were old enough to understand that truth often lives quietly beneath the noise of duty and fame. He told them everything about their grandmother, the warmth she carried, the pain she endured, about a sister who lived far from the cameras, unknown to the world but not forgotten. He wrote that life within the crown was never about perfection or power. It was about humanity, about love, and above all, forgiveness. He paused, closing his eyes for a moment. "You will read this one day," he whispered softly into the still air. "And I hope you will understand." The thoughts of William drifted to her, the sister he had met only once, the woman whose presence had quietly healed a part of his heart. She lived a simple life now near the sea, far from royal walls and flashing lights. She wanted no fame, no recognition, and William had promised her peace every year on the birthday of their mother. He kept that promise. The British royal family has always been a stage where tradition, power, and personal emotions collide in the most unexpected ways. But rarely has a moment stirred as much shock and outrage as Queen Camilla's recent decision inside Windsor. According to Palace Whispers, Camilla allegedly ordered the removal of a portrait of young Princess Charlotte, the daughter of Prince William and Catherine. At first glance, it may seem like a small, almost trivial gesture, yet within the rigidly symbolic world of the monarchy, every detail matters. And such an act carries a weight far beyond the frame of a photograph. For Prince William, who has spent years carefully balancing his duty to the crown with his fierce devotion to his family, this move reportedly struck a nerve. The father in him saw not just a portrait being displaced, but his daughter's place within the family's narrative being undermined. Sources close to the palace suggest his reaction was swift, daring, and uncharacteristically confrontational, a sign that William may no longer be willing to quietly accept Camilla's growing influence inside the walls of Windsor. This incident forces us to ask, was Camilla's decision a calculated power play, an attempt to subtly rewrite the hierarchy within the royal family? Or was it simply an insensitive choice with disastrous optics? Either way, the consequences are dramatic. William's pushback reveals a simmering tension between the next generation of royals and the woman who has long been accused of reshaping the monarchy in her own image. What unfolded after this seemingly small act could reshape public perception of both William and Camilla, and once again remind us that, in the House of Windsor, nothing is ever just about appearances. It began with a terrifying silence. One morning, a senior staff member stopped as the faint light from London seeped into Clarence House's East Gallery, which is noted for its beautifully arranged family portraits. There was something wrong. The walls, which proved the royal line's continuity, seemed different, like a memory that had been lost. The assistant knew it right away after working for the royals for 15 years. There was no longer a photograph of Princess Charlotte's 9th birthday that her mother, the Princess of Wales, took. The picture showed a moment of pure joy and the young princess's confident, charming personality, which is why the staff loved it. Charlotte's look showed that she was more confident than her age. But the beautiful silver frame was missing. There was nothing on the wall. It had been taken out, not put back. By midday, rumors had circulated through the labyrinth of the royal home. People who were trained to be discreet used legal language to avoid direct questions. Was there a curatorial rotation? A subtle rearrangement? The truth seemed more straightforward. A topic of Charlotte's photo with her brothers, Prince George and Prince Louis, showed what the future of the monarchy will be like: stability and peace. The presentation was ruined since Charlotte's picture was absent. It was a quiet that was deafening. People who had worked for Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles understood the unwritten laws of palace optics. Portraits are more than just decorations. They show who you are and what you believe in. They stand for approval, favor, renown, and most importantly, legacy. Taking one away sends a message. A housekeeper from a household in Wales for 10 years was the first to notice the growing unease. They didn't move George's. She informed a close friend in a quiet, strained voice. Louise wasn't moved. It's just Charlotte's, taken away like she didn't belong. The word belong was very important. Princess Charlotte, who was smart, strong-willed, and already showing signs of her late grandmother Diana's subtle charm, was discreetly taken away from her grandfather's official London home. It seemed like a planned, little but important announcement of a new order. Before nightfall, Kensington Palace got the unsettling news from Clarence House. A junior assistant at Kensington heard the story while talking about normal business with a co-worker at Clarence House. He mentioned it without thinking while going over the deliveries for the day, believing it was crucial for operations. One person who saw it happen stated the room transitioned from being busy to being quite quiet. The Princess of Wales was renowned for being calm. Yet, she felt a familiar knot in her stomach. Catherine's public and private lives are all part of a long-term strategy to provide her kids love, stability, and safety. Charlotte has always adored her family's history and the big imperial mansions they lived in. Taking her photo off without a good reason felt like a cruel and planned move. The mood turned from worry to anger when the Prince of Wales came back. He was very concentrated on the details, and his jaw tightened with each word. Taking down a little photo conveyed a bad message. It couldn't be ignored whether it was a claim of power, land, or something more personal and historical. William was in a palace where actions spoke louder than words. He observed firsthand how photos may hurt or help someone's reputation and turn people against one another. He understood what this meant. Without saying anything, he got up from his chair and proceeded to his study. The hidden storm that had been going on all day was about to burst. Queen Camilla would remember his next move, which would be discreet but important. Palace optics. More than just a frame. The royal family values pictures a lot, so knowing how much they are worth helps explain what happened. Portraiture has influenced public perception, reinforced dynastic power, and preserved royal history for centuries. The Windsors have perfected how to communicate visually, from Holbein's dramatic images of Henry VIII to the televised coronation. Royal families are now very careful about whatever pictures they choose. These are not just random pictures of relatives. Each location has a reason. A large picture of a person in a public room at Buckingham Palace or Clarence House shows how important they are and how they are related to the royal family. A former royal courtier's claims, "Nothing on those walls is there by accident." The process of selection, framing, and placement is looked at in great detail. An image of a monarch and their successor shows that things will stay the same. A picture of grandchildren represents family and the future. Taking one away, especially from a child, is like ripping up an official document. The family story is intentionally changed. Queen Elizabeth II employed this unspoken language in a smart and subtle way. The pictures on her desk during her yearly Christmas show were carefully chosen to show who was in and to show how her family had changed. Queen Camilla has been a part of royal life for over 50 years and knows how powerful it is. She has gone from being a hated mistress to a beloved queen consort, and her PR and image management have been amazing. She may know better than anybody else how an image can last. Since becoming queen, Sources believe she has spent more time curating the decor of her royal residences, especially Clarence House, where she has lived with King Charles for a long period. This may lead to problems. Some staff members who have been with the palace for a long time have noted that there are fewer and fewer pictures of Princess Diana in public areas. Some people regard this as a natural step to show the current monarch and his wife, while others see it as Camilla's way of trying to get rid of her predecessor. Camilla has always had a complicated relationship with Diana's legacy and, by extension, with Diana's children and grandchildren, says a family insider. She thinks that the intense interest of the public and media in the Wales, especially Catherine and Charlotte, often overshadows her work and role. Even today, it appears like she's having trouble with spirits. In this delicate psychological setting, the removal of Charlotte's image must be thought upon. It was more than just decorating the inside. It was a power move on the royal chessboard, little, but very important. Camilla may not have thought that the player would never allow his daughter to be a pawn. The Queen's quiet command. Elegant order. It wasn't an official order. No memo. No fight. A Clarence House staffer claimed it happened during a normal afternoon meeting in the morning room. While stirring her Earl Grey tea, Queen Camilla indicated to the East Gallery with a subtle gesture, "The girl in blue doesn't fit with the room's mood anymore," she said in a calm voice. "It should be kept." Beautifully chosen words in a way that is both stylish and classy. In the room, the meaning was plain. Princess Charlotte was the girl in the blue outfit. Camilla called her story tone of the room, which is a kind way of saying it. Catherine took the picture, which exhibited her modern, friendly style that has made her and her family renowned. Some people think that the picture meant something more to Camilla, the Wales's strong and popular heritage, which began with Diana and continues with her son and his family. Princess Charlotte is developing a powerful mix of her mother's elegance, her father's sense of duty, and her late grandmother Diana's star characteristics. This vivid, constant reminder in the palace may have angered a queen who was still striving to win over her subjects. One person responds, "She has her own grandchildren. She is proud of them and has worked to make them a part of royal life, like by making them coronation pages of honor. She probably wants the focus to be on her family as it is now, with her as the head of the family, instead of the family that might have been." The directive was given for whatever reason, whether it was to get her space back because she was feeling insecure or on purpose to show off her new authority. Royal staff were told to obey orders without question. The frame was taken off the hook, wrapped with felt, and put away within an hour. The family wasn't told anything or given any warning. There was nothing there save a child's brilliant smile. Camilla presumably anticipated that the family would think it was unimportant and that the public would overlook it. For years, she had practiced how to have a silent effect on others. In this scenario, she didn't give enough thought to how her target felt and what it meant to them. She took out a stone from a mosaic where each image is painstakingly made. She altered more than simply the wall. She had awakened the protective instincts of a parent who had lost a family member to the palace machine and was determined not to lose another. The leak that changed everything, a staffer's moral dilemma. For days, staff members muttered about the missing photo. A code of silence kept many from speaking up throughout decades of royal service. But the silence was not okay. Eleanor, a longtime servant who was loved by the Princess of Wales, broke it. In 20 years, Eleanor worked for 3 royal families. She has seen scandals and secrets buried behind polished wood and velvet curtains, but this was not the same. It was a nasty little thing to do to a youngster. She couldn't stand it. She witnessed 2 staff grab the painting as she was cleaning in a different hallway. She understood that the senior aide took instructions from the king or queen. With a duster in her fingers, she witnessed Princess Charlotte's bright eyes and confident smile fade away like old furniture. After witnessing Charlotte happily chase butterflies at Balmoral, Eleanor felt angry and protective. Why is this happening to that child? She thought about it. She fought with her conscience for 2 days. If she spoke out, she may lose her job, pension, and career. Royal staff keep secrets and cherish loyalty. But she was stuck between the institution and its current consort, or the future of that institution, which was represented by the young family at Kensington Palace. She got her opportunity when she spoke on the phone with a former co-worker she trusted, who now works at Kensington Palace as an administrative assistant. A call was made to set up the details of the event. After the business meeting, her friend said, "How are things going on your end? Is everything quiet?" Eleanor spoke gently but strongly after a short break. "Not quite. They beat her. Charlotte, the photo of the gallery's birthday, is gone." As the Queen told them to, after a brief pause, the other end remarked, "You're kidding." "I wish I were," Eleanor said with a shudder. "I saw it with my own eyes." It all started with one bold confession. The monarchy's informal network of loyalty and long-standing relationships disseminated the news better than any official source. Eleanor's friend told a key advisor in Kensington, who the Prince of Wales trusted. The data was given special care. It was more believable when it was compared to what other staff members had seen. Eleanor's story was confirmed as true by William's former footman. He is said to have said, "If Eleanor is talking, it's serious." She would never risk her job for a rumor. Prince William found out within 24 hours after Eleanor's call, not from flashy headlines, but from the quiet, loyal voices of the same class that had kept his mother's secrets and now watched over his children's smiles. Taking down the photograph was no longer an option. The question of why. William, who had grown up in a country where titles and tradition often hid the truth, felt he had to inquire. The king's plan and the prince's fury. It was late at night at Adelaide Cottage, the Wales's little cottage in Windsor. The kids were asleep when one of his most trusted private secretaries requested a moment. The Prince of Wales was in his study going over paperwork from the Duchy of Cornwall. The seriously-looking aide handed the prince a folded piece of paper, a short factual account of what happened at Clarence House, including confirmation of the Queen Consort's direct orders. William read it 2 times. He seemed serene, like a king. But anybody who knew him well would have recognized the signs of a storm. His jaw was hard, and his gaze was cold. He placed the paper on his desk without saying anything. William didn't care about the decor, a horrible reminder of what happened. His final trigger was hurting a family member on purpose. His teenage years, the War of the Waleses, when his mother, Diana, was pushed aside, silenced, and quietly taken out of the royal story to make room for Camilla, came rushing back to him. He watched the system consume and throw away individuals when he was young. He promised that it would never happen again while he was in charge. He spotted pictures of his family on the mantel as he walked over. George wore his school uniform with a serious face. Louis smiled and ate cake on his last birthday. And Charlotte had a braid like her mom's. He instantly moved Charlotte's picture frame, which was a little act of protection. This was more than what Camilla was worried about. It was about the system she now worked for, which still felt it could decide who was important. William made his choice in 1 hour. He wouldn't talk to the press or gossip. That was the way things were done. He would talk about this in a straightforward, open, and authoritative way. He asked his private secretary to come back to the study. He spoke in a calm yet forceful voice. "I want the official inventories from Clarence House pulled. It is important to keep track of every curatorial decision made in the East Gallery in the last month. I want names, dates, and explicit directions. Tell me more." The team labored in silence. William would not talk to his stepmother in an emotional way. He would show her evidence. As the Prince of Wales, the next king, he would use his influence in the family. Not only as an angry father, he sat with Catherine later that night. She was pale and taught the basics from her staff. "I didn't want to bother you with it until we were sure," she said in a low voice. William shook his head. and his anger turned into calm resolve. "This is too much. Kath, they don't have her on their chessboard. Our daughter is her." Catherine was sad but not sobbing. Their family was built on her quiet strength. "What are you going to do?" she asked. He responded, "I'll fix it." Camilla deleted a picture. But William would bring back a lot more. He would bring back a principle. He was ready to tell the world and the monarchy that taking Wales away would hurt its strong tradition. Confrontation. A fight over private wills. The following day, there was an unspoken sense of worry throughout Clarence House. The soft carpet hid the sound of staff members' footsteps as they moved. Everyone knew a battle was coming. The Prince of Wales was by himself as his car drove into the private courtyard. He didn't have any advisors, press secretaries, or security about him save for his driver. Visit for personal reasons, not official ones. People saw him going down the corridors, with his shoulders set and fire in his eyes. Queen Camilla looked over charity briefings in the elegant white drawing room. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. "Ma'am?" a footman murmured. She looked up in horror. It was unusual for William to visit alone. He was at the door before she could get ready. She got up to greet him after years of planning. "William." A big surprise. Her appeal fell flat. William didn't smile. He didn't kiss her cheek. He was still inside the room wearing his coat. He looked at her and whispered in a voice that made her shiver. Why was Charlotte's picture taken down? A profound silence appeared to smother the rich space. A long bad moment went by. Camilla blinked, and she lost her cool. It was just a small curatorial change. "Darling," she remarked, trying to seem light even if her voice was a little strained. "We made the space feel new again." William stood steadfast. There was eye contact. The picture of George stays. Louis stays. Only Charlotte's was taken. I'll say it again. Why? His voice was quiet, yet powerful. He had never spoken to her in that tone before. It was the voice of a future king. Camilla laid her papers on the old desk to steady herself. "I didn't mean to hurt William's feelings. The problem was visual balance. You know how sensitive the press and public are." William stayed quiet while he pierced through her lies with the harsh, cold truth. "Is this about how people see things in general? Or how you see things? Stop pretending that this is about how it looks. This is about legacy. You can't change who is in this family's tale." There was an evident accusation between them that broke years of family calm. Camilla tightened up. The woman who normally had a prepared response was mute for the first time. She was facing the scary man he had become, not the spoiled child she had known. William looked at her for a few more seconds to let his words sink in. He went after making his point. He looked back from the door to offer his final non-negotiable word. "Set the image back," he said, gently but firmly. "Put it back publicly. Or I will. I promise my story will be less private." He departed, and the room was much quieter than when he got there. Something fundamental shifted in that room. A child who witnessed his mother go from the narrative had drawn a strong line. He was now a father, and he would protect the next generation with strength that no queen could equal. The triumphant return of a gilded framed portrait. The punishment was secret and planned much like the crime. There was no press release or response from the public. The message was received and dealt with within 48 hours after William's arrival. On a wet Thursday morning, a Royal Collection Trust vehicle pulled up to Clarence House. An art conservator and two of the Queen's top advisors oversaw the reinstallation, which shows how important it was. The image of Princess Charlotte was found. It wasn't put back in its original spot in the East Gallery. Instead, it was put near the bottom of the grand staircase, which is a significant home artery that family members and important visitors use often. It also got a wider, fancier golden frame. A little brass plate was affixed on the bottom with a simple but powerful message: Princess Charlotte of Wales. The future of the monarchy. It was no longer a family portrait. An official statement said It was a public acknowledgement of her value, not merely a repair. Word spread quickly among the royals about the portrait's recovery. An advisor at Clarence House said that after an internal family clarification, the Prince of Wales directly suggested the reinstallation and new visible positioning. Palace speakers understood the code. Clarification means that William set the law, and it was followed. Later that day, servants said that Queen Camilla stopped for a long time when she passed the stairs. The bold writing, "New frame," and photo caught her eye. She didn't say anything and kept going. She knew she had been outsmarted. The picture came back with more weight. It was now telling a family story without any cuts. The news gave Kensington some quiet solace. Catherine softly informed Charlotte that her picture was back at Grandpa's house. She stated that adults make errors, but love and family always mend things. Charlotte inquired plainly like a kid. "Why was it torn down?" Catherine paused before she spoke. She murmured, "Maybe they forgot how special you are for a moment." But Dad reminded them, even though it happened behind closed doors. This event changed the balance of power in the monarchy forever. The future king publicly challenged Camilla's subtle claim to power. The picture is now framed in gold and truth at Clarence House, a silent testament to a father's love and a prince's power. Things that were quietly taken away have come back with meaning. Charlotte's place in royal history is now in memory and paint, protected by a strong will. For many decades, the British royal family has been carefully presented as a symbol of stability. But in recent weeks, behind the gates of Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere is said to be very different. According to several royal sources and reports published in March 2026, the royal household is facing a chain of developments that even longtime observers describe with a single phrase. They are beside themselves, confused, anxious, and unable to believe that everything is happening at the same time. At the center of this shock is King Charles III. The king is believed to still be continuing a quiet battle with cancer. The palace has tried to keep information to a minimum. But every time the schedule changes, every time a royal event is cancelled, more questions appear. Is the king's health truly as stable as official statements continue to claim? Meanwhile, another scandal has erupted and made the situation even more tense. The king's younger brother, Prince Andrew, has once again become the focus of investigations and controversial reports. News of his arrest in early reports created a new wave of shock, prompting the public to question the credibility and crisis management ability of the entire royal family. In that context, speculation has begun to spread. Some observers believe that if the situation continues to escalate, the pressure could force the royal household to reconsider the way power is managed. And when the future of the crown is mentioned, the two names most often discussed are Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Are they quietly preparing for a larger role sooner than expected? That is also the question dividing public opinion. Do you believe King Charles III will overcome this period and continue to reign for many more years? Or does the monarchy need a major change to protect its image and stability? Comment number 1 if you believe the king is still strong enough. Or comment number 2 if you think it is time for the royal family to modernize quickly. And now, let us look deeper into what is really happening behind the closed doors of the palace. For many months before the recent positive updates appeared, the health of King Charles III had become one of the most discussed subjects among royal observers. Everything began with the first leaked information that the king was undergoing treatment for cancer. The official statement from the palace at the time was brief and cautious. It confirmed only that the illness had been discovered during a medical examination and that treatment had begun immediately. However, the lack of detail in those early announcements unintentionally created an information gap. And within that gap, rumors quickly spread. Some British tabloid newspapers at the time used words such as struggling to describe the king's condition, Television analysis even questioned whether his reign could be significantly shortened. On social media, speculation went even further. Some people suggested that the royal family was panicking behind the scenes. Such comments spread quickly, especially whenever the king's schedule was adjusted or cancelled. In that environment, the relative silence of the palace only increased public curiosity. Long-time observers of the British monarchy understand that the royal family traditionally avoids releasing too many details about the health of the sovereign. But this time, the scale of public attention seemed far greater than anything the palace had faced before. What is notable is that despite undergoing treatment, King Charles III has continued to carry out many important duties within his capacity. He has still appeared at official meetings, still signed state documents, and still maintained communication with the government. This suggests that the king's condition may not be as serious as some of the speculation circulating online. A major turning point appeared toward the end of 2025. In a rare message released in December, the king shared more details about his treatment for the first time. He described the early results as good news. According to the king, the illness had been detected at an early stage, which played a decisive role. Doctors were able to begin treatment before the disease had progressed too far. As a result, the treatment process began to show positive responses. In that message, King Charles III also used a striking phrase. He described the early diagnosis as a personal blessing. The sentence was quickly quoted widely across British media, not only because it sounded deeply personal, but also because it reflected a broader message. The king wanted to turn his experience into a reminder about the importance of regular health examinations. Royal advisors later explained that the king is now entering what they call a precautionary phase. This means the treatment process is continuing, but the intensity has gradually been reduced as signs of recovery become clearer. Some royal duties are still adjusted to fit the treatment schedule, but overall the king is believed to be responding well to modern medical methods. This information immediately changed the atmosphere in discussions about the future of the British monarchy. For many months before that, many people had begun to ask whether an early transfer of power to the next generation might be inevitable. But when positive signals began to appear, analysts started to become more cautious in their predictions. However, what made the statement from King Charles III particularly notable was not only his personal condition. The king also emphasized a figure that surprised many people. According to medical statistics in the United Kingdom, more than 50% of people face a risk of developing cancer at some point in their lives. This number is not new to the medical community, but when it was repeated by the monarch himself in the context of his personal story, the media impact became far more powerful. Health organizations in the United Kingdom reported that after that message, the number of people registering for health examinations and cancer screening increased significantly in many areas. Some doctors even suggested that this effect could help save thousands of lives in the long term. When a highly influential figure, such as the monarch, shares a personal experience with illness, the message often spreads faster than any public awareness campaign. Within the royal family, the positive signals about the king's health were said to bring a certain level of relief. Sources close to the palace said that the tense atmosphere during the first months of treatment had eased considerably. Long-term plans of the royal household, including international visits and major charitable initiatives, began to be discussed again with cautious optimism. Even so, that does not mean all pressure has disappeared. While the story of King Charles III's health has gradually moved in a more positive direction, a series of other issues within the royal family have continued to erupt in the media. Investigations connected to Prince Andrew, debates about the public image of the monarchy, and questions about the long-term future of the crown continue to appear almost every week. For that reason, the overall picture of the British royal family today still has two sides. On one hand, the health of the king appears to be improving thanks to early detection and effective treatment. On the other hand, the political and media pressure surrounding the royal family has not diminished, and it is precisely within that contrast that the next chapter of the story begins to take shape. Because even as the king's health gradually stabilizes, the undercurrents created by family scandals continue to rise, pushing the monarchy into a new and difficult period. While positive news about the health of King Charles III began to ease the atmosphere within the royal household, another event suddenly erupted and quickly captured the full attention of the media. The figure at the center of this shock was Prince Andrew. For many years, he has been accustomed to becoming the focus of controversy. But the most recent developments in early 2026 pushed the story to an entirely different level. According to reports that appeared in February 2026, Prince Andrew was temporarily detained by authorities for about 11 hours in connection with an investigation related to allegations of misconduct in public office. This is a serious accusation within the British legal system, typically used when an official is suspected of abusing a position of authority to share sensitive information or improperly influence public decisions. The focus of the investigation revolves around claims that during the period when he served as a United Kingdom trade envoy, Prince Andrew may have shared certain sensitive information with Jeffrey Epstein. Although no official conclusion has been announced, the reappearance of the Epstein name in investigative documents immediately triggered a new wave of controversy around the world. After 11 hours of questioning, Prince Andrew was released. However, sources say that the investigation is still continuing. This means his legal situation has not yet been fully resolved. For the British royal family, the mere fact that a senior member was detained for questioning is already a significant shock to the institution's public image. Media analysts in the United Kingdom believe that the public reaction this time has been much stronger than during previous scandals. One reason is that the name Jeffrey Epstein has become a symbol of one of the largest scandals involving international elites in many decades. Any powerful figure believed to have connections with Epstein immediately faces intense public scrutiny. After being released, Prince Andrew is believed to have withdrawn into a relatively private life at Sandringham House, one of the most famous royal estates. According to several sources who have followed the royal family for many years, he has almost completely avoided public appearances and has minimized social activities. People close to him describe his state of mind as highly tense after the intense wave of criticism from the media. Some longtime sources even say that during earlier periods of intense pressure, royal advisors once worried about Prince Andrew's mental health. At one point, it was said that he was being closely monitored to ensure his personal safety. Although these reports were never officially confirmed, they continue to be mentioned whenever a new scandal appears. What is notable is that the debate surrounding the case is not focused only on Prince Andrew himself. It has also opened a larger argument about how the media and the public treat different powerful figures. Some commentators argue that the reaction toward Andrew has become a form of pile-on. This term is used to describe a situation in which many media organizations simultaneously focus criticism on a single individual, causing public pressure to multiply rapidly. Those who support this argument often point to a controversial comparison. They refer to the previously reported connections between Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein. Some reports indicate that Clinton appeared on flights or at events connected to Epstein on several occasions. However, according to critics who believe the media response has been unfair, the level of public criticism directed at Clinton does not appear to be as intense as what Prince Andrew has faced. Of course, such comparisons have also been challenged by many analysts. They argue that each case involves different legal and political contexts. However, the fact that this debate exists shows how sensitive the entire issue has become. For the British royal family, the scandal becomes even more uncomfortable when looking back at Prince Andrew's position in the history of the family. When he was born in 1960, he was the second son of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. During many of his early years, He was regarded as one of the most important figures in the line of succession. In fact, there was a time when Prince Andrew stood in the second position in the line of succession to the throne. At that time, only his older brother, King Charles III, stood ahead of him in the order of succession. This reflects a very different period in royal history. At that time, Andrew's future seemed closely connected to major public roles for many decades, but over time, everything changed. The birth of new royal generations gradually pushed his position lower in the line of succession. When Prince William and later the children of William were born, the order of succession continued to shift. By the year 2026, Prince Andrew was believed to be in the 8th position in the line of succession to the throne. This number is often mentioned in analyses as a symbol of the dramatic change in his status. From a prince who once stood close to the throne, he became a figure almost separated from official royal activities. The situation became even more complicated when some documents related to the Jeffrey Epstein case continued to be released in recent years. These documents, often referred to collectively as the Epstein files, sparked new debates about individuals who once appeared within Epstein's network of relationships. Each time a new document was mentioned, the name of Prince Andrew appeared again in newspaper headlines, even when there was no new information directly connected to him. Experts on royal media say this is an extremely difficult situation for the palace. On one hand, they must maintain the principle of not interfering in legal investigations. On the other hand, every day that the scandal continues to appear on the front pages of newspapers damages the overall image of the monarchy. In that context, the role of King Charles III becomes particularly sensitive. As the head of the family and also the monarch, he must balance his personal responsibility toward his younger brother with his duty to protect the reputation of the royal institution. Some observers believe that for this reason, Prince Andrew has almost completely stopped participating in official royal activities in recent years. Limiting his public appearances has been seen as an effort to separate his personal scandal from the image of the entire monarchy. However, the detention in February 2026 shows that the story is not yet finished. Every new development in the investigation has the potential to trigger another wave of controversy. For the British royal family, that means the media pressure continues to accumulate. For that reason, the scandal surrounding Prince Andrew is no longer simply the story of one individual. It has become a major test of the entire royal family's ability to manage a crisis. And while the investigation has not yet reached a final conclusion, its impact has already spread to the very center of power within the monarchy. Because in the end, this scandal does not affect only Prince Andrew. It also places direct pressure on the shoulders of King Charles III and the entire British royal family. While the scandals connected to Prince Andrew continue to generate waves of controversy, many royal observers have begun to notice another trend quietly developing inside the British monarchy. It is the clear rise of a group of figures who are increasingly seen as the stable pillars of the family. Three names frequently mentioned in recent analyses are Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Anne. Princess Royal. At a time when the image of the monarchy is being tested by many challenges, their presence is viewed as an important source of stability. What is particularly notable is that each of them brings a different type of influence, from personal image and public experience to the ability to maintain the trust of the people. The case of Catherine, Princess of Wales, is a typical example. In recent months, her health once caused concern among the public when news of her cancer treatment was announced. For many months, her absence from royal activities became a major topic of discussion in newspapers and on social media. However, when Catherine gradually returned to public events, the public reaction showed that the level of interest in her was far greater than many analysts had predicted. Royal journalists have observed that the return of Catherine, Princess of Wales, has been marked by a clear sense of confidence. Her recent appearances are often described with words such as radiant, calm, and relaxed. This creates a strong contrast with the difficult period earlier, when her health became the focus of many rumors. Some media experts believe that Catherine genuinely enjoys her public role. Unlike some members of the royal family who have appeared uncomfortable with media attention, she often shows a natural ease when participating